We'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm going to ask Captain Williams, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, will you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Captain. Jennifer, will you please call a roll?
Councilmember Avila,
Here?
Councilmember Beaver,
Here.
Councilmember Thorpe,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Duncan, Mayor Bogue.
Here. All right, so first of all, Ray, do we have any changes to the agenda this evening?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and successor agency members and the chair. There are revisions to the minutes of the successor agency that have been distributed, revisions to amended agenda item number 7, or amendment to agenda item number 7. And staff would respectfully request that the City Council allow item number 3 to be discussed under department reports, perhaps the first department report prior to item number 5. Call it 4.5.
Before number 5?
Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone have any objections to the changes to the agenda? Is everyone okay with that? Do we need a vote, Ray?
Yes. Please, to change the agenda.
Okay. So is there a motion to?
I'll make a motion that we move item number 3 from the consent agenda before item 5 under department reports. All right?
Yes.
We have a motion. We have a
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
If I may,
so-
Mr. Mayor, just for the record, the city attorney, I think, is on the phone this evening.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so moving right along, we do have a special presentation, and the first special presentation will be CDBG CV Small Business Assistance Loan Grant recipients. Is that good?
Yes.
All right.
Good evening, Mayor Bowe and City Council members. Thank you for this opportunity to present an update on the city's CDBG CV Small Business Loan to Grant program. Over much of last year, staff worked on developing this program, which was approved by council last May, using the CDBG funds that were awarded to the city. Under this program, the city provides loan to grants in the amount of $10,000 to approved businesses. Just a little background on this program, it is tied to federal grant funding, the Community Development Block Grant. So there were many requirements that we as staff had to incorporate to this program to ensure it not only benefited the community or the target population, but also met strict CDBG guidelines. All CDBG programs must meet one of 3 national objectives. 1, benefit low to moderate income persons. 2, aid the prevention or elimination of slums or blight. Or 3, meet a need having a particular urgency such as a natural disaster. This program met national objective number 1, benefiting low to moderate income persons, in that all participating businesses are required to retain a low to moderate income employee for a continuous 6-month period. Businesses meeting this requirement are considered compliant and will have their loan turned into a grant, while businesses that are unable to meet this requirement will be considered non-compliant and will be required to repay the loan. This application required extensive documentation from applicants. We had 13, but ultimately 4 businesses were approved to receive the loan to grant. Those are Hickory Ranch Steakhouse, Yucaipa, Steamers Fine Cleaners and Laundry, and Queen Bean Cafe. One of those applicants, Yucaipa, is with us this evening. Unfortunately, the other 3 were unable to attend. The city was the only city in the county to implement a small business assistance program utilizing CDBG funds, and per the county, no city has actually implemented such a program in the last 10 to 15 years. So both of those really speak to how complex it is to develop and administer such a program. So despite having just 4 applicants, we are proud to have offered this to our community. So thank you, council, for approving the program and your support. With that, I'd like to call up Scott Daniels from Yucaipa, who is here this evening to accept their loan to grant check and take this opportunity for a photo with the council.
Go down.
You have a few words, Scott, you'd
Have
like
anything
to say?
Yes. Yes. Council, city, thank you very much for getting this program together. While the government and our state has failed us, it's refreshing to see a handout during this, and it'll be used to retain 2 employees for the 6 months. So thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
Can I keep this?
Sure.
Okay, so at this time, I'd like to call up Samantha Johnson. So we have an approval and presentation of a proclamation for the month of January as National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month. Would you like to explain that a little bit more, Samantha?
Yes. Well, my name is Samantha Johnson, and on behalf of Grace Point Fellowship Church, especially today, which just so happens to be National Human Trafficking Awareness Day, I would like to thank you council members and Mayor Avila on the decision to proclaim January as Human Trafficking Awareness Month. We at Grace Point are well aware that the prevalence of human trafficking is widespread and has increased exponentially at the onset of COVID last year, due in part to more accessibility for predators to children online. We feel it is our responsibility, not only as Christians, but as good, responsible humans and citizens of this community, to do our part to take a clear stand against the horrific acts committed against children daily. In the midst of such division in our political climate, we believe this is a unifying cause that many would not hesitate to get behind. With the city's support, we believe our efforts, especially locally, will be exponential. Our upcoming Rescue Sunday event will be held at Grace Point Fellowship Church on Sunday, January 24th. It is an outdoor event of awareness, prayer, and praise. It will be the second of many that will inform our community about how to keep their own family safe, how to play a practical role in trafficking prevention, and how to support victims of trafficking. We're passionate about this cause and are partnering with and channeling support to Run to Rescue, the most local human trafficking aftercare home, as one of our motions to make a positive difference. We also have given the community an opportunity to donate to our comfort bags, which contain items such as blankets, stuffed animals, and snacks to provide for victims right after they've been rescued. Again, I just want to thank you for considering this.
Thank you, Samantha. I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to Councilmember Avila, who actually has the proclamation. I believe he's going to read it for us.
Right.
And then once he's done reading it, we are going to make a motion and vote for the approval.
Thank you for considering it then.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Bogue. All right, as the mayor said, this is a proclamation of the City of Yucaipa declaring the month of January 2021 to be the National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month. whereas human trafficking is a form of modern-day slavery occurring in countries throughout the world and in communities across our nation. Millions of men, women, and children are victims of human trafficking, subjected to force, fraud, or coercion for the purposes of slavery and commercial sexual exploitation. And whereas, although it takes many forms, in every case it goes against the core principles of individual freedom and civil rights that our nation stands for. And whereas the United States continues to lead the global movement to end modern-day slavery by working to combat human trafficking, prosecute the perpetrators, help victims recover and rebuild their lives, and raise awareness about this worldwide epidemic. Whereas the citizens of Yucaipa stand with the survivors, advocates, and organizations dedicated to building a world where men, women, and children are no longer victims of human trafficking. Together, we commit to a society where our sense of humanity tells us that we can eradicate human trafficking and support the right of every person to be free. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Yucaipa City Council does hereby proclaim the month of January as National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month, and encourage our citizens to recognize the vital role we all can play to make a difference in our community. Signed, Mayor Bogue and the rest of the City Council.
Thanks, David. So with that, do I hear a motion that we accept this proclamation?
I'll motion.
So we have a motion?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, so should we have our picture taken?
Yes.
And I believe this is Grace Point Fellowship Church. Or if there's anyone else from Grace Point would like to come down and join us in the picture, please do so.
Thank you. You can go right now. Oh, thank you. No, you're I'm sorry. All right, cheese. Oh, that's right. That's good. One more. Thank you.
Okay, so moving right along, we now have an employee introduction. Who will be? Ben.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. It is with great pleasure that I get to introduce today a new member to our team, which is Miss Rachel Carnell, who is our new Code Enforcement Officer. As part of Code Enforcement, she is responsible for essentially responding to code enforcement violations that are received and working to, one, resolve the complaints that are turned in from customers, members of the public, to make sure that their concerns are addressed, and then also working with the violators to have a expeditious remedy to those citations as well, and trying to make sure that our municipal code and development code is adhered to through those different stuff, and then also provides inspections to our city's poultry ranches, our mobile home parks, and other sites as well throughout the community. She has about 14 years of experience as a code enforcement officer, and prior to Yucaipa had worked for both the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department as well as the City of Colton, serving in a variety of different capacities. And so kind of a few different things I wanted to touch on very quickly is that her ability to step into the role and hit the job running has been a tremendous asset for our department. And her experience provides ideas and ways that we can implement our process more effectively. And her approach with customers itself is top-notch. She is a very calm, pleasant demeanor, works very softly with violators to try to get the code violations resolved well, but is also firm and steady with them to make sure that progress is being made as well. And so she provides, I think, a very tactful way of addressing those code enforcement violations and has a good rapport with our staff as well, and is very much a team player, willing to step in and help out the other code enforcement officers wherever possible to make sure that we work as efficiently and as effectively as we can as a department as a whole. She does note her hobbies include traveling, playing board games, bike riding, and reading. And then her family includes her husband and her 3 children, 1 daughter and 2 sons. And then she also has 3 grandchildren that she enjoys spending time with. And it's a tremendous pleasure to have her with our department, and we'll look forward to many years of service and help with our code enforcement actions.
Well, welcome to Yucaipa. Would you like to say anything?
Just thank you for this opportunity. It's been a wonderful experience so far, and I just hope I can be a positive impact.
All right, and we're gonna get our exercise, and we're gonna come back down there and take another picture.
Cardio?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so that takes us into public comment. I do have a few speaker slips here. I have 2 are the same, but Al Kelly.
Good evening. I'd like to thank you all for endorsing that support against slavery and sex trafficking. And the only thing that I want to add to that is it took us over 2 years to get a massage parlor that was entertaining sex acts because we had provided you guys with the menu that they put online near the Kwanam Buddhist Monastery. It seems as that the hands of code enforcement were tied way too tight. I don't know if you've improved a little bit on those. There are still 3 massage parlors in Yucaipa that are involved in the sexual trade, and that is directly tied hand in hand. I know it's funny, Mr. Avila, but it's not. And I know it's tied hand in hand with the sexual slavery, so thank you.
All right. I want to say is it Tanya?
I have a second public comment that I'm ceding to Dr. Bradshaw.
Well, right here I have, I believe it says Tanya. Is it, am I right? Tanya Bradshaw? I'm sorry, I can't read the.
Hi, my name is Dan Morgan. I'm ceding my time to Tonda Bradshaw.
Okay. Okay.
Are they allowed to do that?
Good evening. Comments from Brenda Abraham, Yucaipa, California. I would love to be speaking in person tonight, but out of deep sense of responsibility and care for my community, I'm quarantining at home after exposure to SARS-CoV-2. And my husband, Dr. Ali Abraham, who's an emergency department physician at one of San Bernardino County's most severely impacted facilities. My comments will be read by a friend. In the interest of public health and safety, I ask that the City Council withdraw its support for the lawsuit filed by San Bernardino County against the state of California. Filing this amicus brief during the worst surge of the entire pandemic is a stunning and craven abdication abdication of the duty with which this council has been entrusted, to wit, developing policies and formulating strategies that support the vitality and economic viability of this city. Ensuring vitality, the continuation of life, is rightly listed as the first responsibility, since without a healthy population to participate in the local economy, there cannot possibly be economic viability. Our state has had 2.69 million confirmed cases, 29,699 deaths. San Bernardino County has reported 224,350 cases and 1,520 deaths. 4,320 cases and 56 deaths in the city of Yucaipa. In the past week alone, 593 new cases and 4 deaths. 56 of your neighbors have died from a preventable viral infection, and your most pressing concern is for the need for people to gather at breweries and have dine-in Taco Tuesdays. In his statement regarding City Council's efforts to alleviate the impacts of COVID, Mayor Greg Bowe makes it perfectly clear that the suffering and possible death of 1%, almost 600 members of this community, is a reasonable cost for these businesses to remain open. He then goes on without irony to wish us all a happy and healthy holiday. It is appalling disingenuous to claim that all businesses are essential during a pandemic, while feigning concern for the loss of our public health and safety services. My husband is seeing patients in a tent in the parking lot of his hospital, using the waiting room, the surgical suites to keep up with the influx of patients. Ambulances wait for hours out of service to offload patients because there simply are no beds to put them in and nurses to care for them. The National Guard has been deployed to assist a situation that is described as applying a Band-Aid to an arterial bleed. But certainly the need to get a haircut at Fantastic Sam's is worth completely overwhelming our hospitals and healthcare providers. CNN has been playing a segment filmed at my husband's facility that shows terrifying detail of the impact that COVID is having in our county. I suspect none of our council members have seen it, though, because it's all fake news if it doesn't promulgate the hoax narrative that some of you have very publicly embraced since the beginning of the pandemic. Maybe you think the facility's in the high desert. What does that have to do with Yucaipa? They're at capacity. They're at 300% of capacity. That means they are transferring patients down to our hospitals, to Redlands, to Arrowhead Regional Medical Center. They're all at capacity. They're all at overcapacity. They have tents in their parking lots. National Guard has been deployed. Medical and nursing students are taking care of patients because the system is overwhelmed. The system is in an inflection point, and you have all decided that the best way to address this crisis is to fight the governor's stay-at-home orders by joining a cynical and reckless lawsuit. This is the height of irresponsibility, and it demonstrates a shameful level of disregard for the Yucaipians that you swore to serve. I pray that our communities don't suffer a mass casualty event or a natural disaster right now, because we absolutely have no hospital beds. We have limited EMS capacity to handle it. However, since suffering 2 devastating fires this past summer, affecting most of our surrounding mountain communities, we are at extreme risk for deadly flash flooding and catastrophic debris flows. Residents were told at meetings that it wasn't a matter of if, but when these disasters will strike. I know that at least 2 of our council members are fully aware of the horrors that even a 1/4 inch of rain per hour on our devastated mountains could cause, because they were at that meeting. How will our already totally inundated emergency medical system be able to respond to an event such of that magnitude? There is no infrastructure that can handle the kind of catastrophic event that could occur. All or most of you describe yourself as godly men. So I'm appealing to the sense of morals and decency that you must aspire to. Yesterday, California's last Republican governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, published a video denouncing the seditious attack on our nation's capital and called on elected officials to have a servant's heart, and went on to describe it as serving something larger than oneself. He called for elected officials to put aside politics and party for the good of the people they serve. This is what I ask of council: to emerge from 4 years of fever-driven that has resulted in public servants at all levels politicizing and minimizing the threat that this virus represents. The reality is that your actions and inactions matter, and that the effects will persist long after toxic leaders and peddlers of conspiracy theories have been swept into history's dustbin. I invite you, no, I challenge you to spend a day with my husband in the emergency department, to witness true patriotism, caring for one's community with a servant's heart, and making a positive difference in the lives of people without regard for politics or personal agenda.
All right, thanks, Tonda. That was, I gave you two.
No, I get
two.
9 minutes
I gave you-
total.
No, you gave it,
Sessions
there's
and
two.
myself, that's 9
So there's-
minutes.
No, I gave you, there were 6.
No, I have myself as well,
So
that's
I'm gonna
9.
ask, could, the next, Travis Heaps?
It's 3.
Travis?
Al Kelly for public comments, Dan for public comments, and myself. That's 9 minutes.
No.
Yes,
It
it
says- It
is.
says right here, Dan Morgan gives to Dr. Bradshaw.
And so does Al Kelly, and Dr. Bratch is right here. That's 3. If you can't do the math, it's 3 times 3. That's 9.
No, it doesn't say that here, so thank you. Travis Heaps? Number 11, okay. Ariana Hahn?
Hi there. I'd like to comment on Councilman Avila's words at the last city council meeting on December 12th. To refresh your memory, and especially because he was misquoted in the News Mirror, Councilman Avila stated, quote, "As you know, 2020 has been a very tumultuous year, not just with COVID, but with the BLM thing that invaded our town for some time. And then we had this huge fire that occurred in Yucaipa. To say the least, it's been very much of an Uncle Toad's wild ride at Disneyland," end quote. From this statement, several truths are apparent. First, from his use of the diminutive thing and the term invasion, we can see that Councilman Avila continues to have little respect for the racial justice movement, and that he sees it as external to the interests of our town. It's precisely these kinds of inflammatory statements that drew national media attention to Yucaipa over the summer, along with our town's condoning illegal actions, including Councilmember Duncan with his shotgun at Yucaipa, and subsequent emboldening of right-wing ideologies, similar to what we saw escalate into a deadly riot at the Washington Capitol last week. There was no BLM invasion of Yucaipa. Many of those who participated in demonstrations live here, and the events of August 1st were turned into a spectacle only when motorists were preventing from continuing their caravan due to road blockades and harassment by Yucaipians and others. On that note, Ray Casey, did you not make promises to multiple people in this community that there would be a community task force established to look into Yucaipa's reputation in relation to diversity and inclusion? Why has this evaporated? But this is not my main point. Instead, I stress that the lesson to take away from Councilman Avila's statement is not pity for what was put on his plate by circumstances outside of his control, but that the city brought the tumultuous year of 2020 upon itself through partisan, ineffective, and careless actions and words such as those I quoted. You are all doing it again with the recent amicus brief amid a COVID surge centered right here in Southern California. When Yucaipa is in the news for this move, which it inevitably will be, you can't go blaming private citizens for ringing alarm bells or press that cover the story. You will have brought the negative attention once again upon yourselves. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Councilman Avila, I want to draw your attention to one more important lesson in your Mr. Toad's Wild Ride comments. The Disneyland ride is based on the story, The Wind in the Willows, which tells of Toad, who is a friendly and kind-hearted guy, but aimless and conceited. One of Toad's obsessions is motor cars, but Toad is a terrible driver, and every time he gets behind the wheel, he crashes. Eventually, he's sent to jail, but he escapes and begins driving again. Guess what happens? He's reckless and crashes. Mr. Toad the Ride at Disneyland takes an even darker turn, ending in a fiery hellscape. The metaphor is splendid. Bobby Duncan is Toad, and city government is his motor car. You all have let him behind the wheel enough times to know what the end result is going to be if you do it again, and yet you all selected him as mayor pro tem. Don't be surprised.
Ariana, that's actually, I let you go a little bit over the 3 minutes, but thank you. Thank you.
Okay, don't be surprised if you
Thank
continue
you.
to have accidents. Furthermore,
Thank
I
you.
note that there's an
All right, so moving along, that takes us to our consent agenda. And remember that item number 3 has been pulled, so we're talking a consent agenda of items 1 and 2.
I'll move approval of this consent agenda, less item number 3.
I second.
All right, so we have a first and a second for the consent agenda. Any discussion? All in favor? Say
Aye.
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 All right, so that was 5-0 for the approval of the consent agenda. So that's now going to take us into mayor and council member business reports. Does the mayor, or I guess that would be me, does the council members have anything they'd like to add? Justin, you have anything? No? Bob?
No.
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 Okay. All right, so that takes us to department reports, and the first one would be item number 4, the Youth Advisory Committee appointment, and this is Megan or Sarah? Sarah.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I am here this evening as a staff liaison for the Youth Advisory Committee to recommend the appointment of Madison Wessel to the committee. As you know, the committee serves as an advisory body to you, the Yucaipa City Council, and the intent is to improve youth involvement in city issues, activities, and provide community members a roadmap for success. Madison is currently a sophomore at Arrowhead Christian Academy and a longtime resident of Yucaipa. Despite the COVID-19 pandemic, she has maintained outstanding grades and is involved in high school extracurricular activities that include ASB and mock trial. Madison believes in strong family roots and is passionate about community service. She is also excited to join the committee, and the committee is equally eager to welcome her. The Youth Advisory Committee members will continue to recruit for the remaining at-large vacant positions. There is no fiscal impact as a result of this action. Madison Wessel is being recommended for appointment to the Youth Advisory Committee for a 2-year commitment, effective today through September 1st, 2022. At this time, I invite Madison to say a few words, after which we'll conclude our presentations, and city staff are available for questions.
Good evening. My name is Madison Wessel. I would like to begin by thanking the Youth Advisory Committee and the City Council for my consideration. I've lived in Yucaipa for my entire life. I attended Yucaipa Christian School until the 2nd grade and then transferred to ILCS until the 8th grade, and I'm currently a sophomore at Arrowhead Christian Academy. I would like to be on the Yucaipa Youth Advisory Committee for 2 reasons. First, throughout my life, I've seen many events planned by the city of Yucaipa. From summer movie nights to the haunted house, there's always fun, safe events for families and friends to make lasting memories at. I want to be a part of planning these events and seeing them through. Secondly, I've been looking into what I want to be when I'm older. Currently, I'm interested in law, economics, and government. Being on the Yucaipa Youth Advisory Committee would allow me to explore these fields while also serving my community. I'm looking forward to this opportunity, and I feel that I can benefit the Yucaipa Youth Advisory Committee through my determination, time management, and new ideas. Thank you again for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Madison. So are there any questions for Madison?
I don't.
That was a great presentation, and it's a great resume. Welcome.
Welcome aboard.
All right, so is that a motion to accept Madison?
That was a motion to accept, yes.
All right, so we have a motion.
I'll second.
We
You're
have a
very well
second.
spoken. I think you'll do very good for us.
Thank you.
Yes, very, very articulate. That was great. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Welcome, Madison. You know what? We're going to do one more picture. We need more for exercise.
And then I'm going to give you my 2 children.
All right, 1, 2, and 3. Great, thank you, guys.
Okay, so that's going to take us to the treasurer's report, item number 3, and I believe that's Ray, right?
If I may, at least start us off, and then
Okay.
I'd like to invite our finance manager, Ryan Blackersby, to step up to the mic. Just wanted to take this opportunity to kind of review the process for the treasurer's report, and we've kind of got, Ryan and his team have got it down where it's coming to us consistently, and together with the bank reconciliation, bond reconciliation, all the other things that we needed to catch up on, really give them a lot of credit for getting caught up and doing those things on a consistent basis. And this is probably a good opportunity to kind of re-review the treasurer's report and the importance of it in the overall scheme of things, and talk a little bit about timing relative to revenues and the cash flow needs and all of that goes into the treasurer's report. It's a positive report in terms of comparison between last month and this month. And Ryan's got some additional information that makes it even more positive going into next month. So I'll let him share that with you.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Casey. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. You have before you the Treasurer's Report for the month of November. In order to comply with California Government Code, city staff presents a Treasurer's Report on a monthly basis to the city manager and subsequently to council. There is no direct action needed rather than to simply receive and file the report, as this is simply to keep everyone informed on the current cash and investment balances of the city. I'd like to direct your attention to attachment 1, which is the actual treasurer's report. It shows what is in essence a snapshot in time of the city's cash investment balances, detailed by investment type, compared to the same snapshot for the prior month. The top section shows funds under control of the city. That's basically the city's cash and investment balances. The bottom section shows funds with fiscal agents. These are funds required to be set aside into separate accounts to comply with bond documents. I'd like to point out, as you may see, the November funds under control of the city did increase from October. This increase is mainly found in the city checking account. It's due principally to a large receipt of property tax payments received in November, approximately 2. In the subsequent month of December, which is not reflected on this report, the city received an additional large payment of property taxes, just over $6.4 million in total. And the next treasurer's report will be reflective of that cash receipt. This timing of property tax receipts at the end of the fiscal year is quite typical. We usually see large increases around November, December, and then again around March, April, connected to the timing of property tax due dates. Also of note, the city is expecting an additional large cash flow soon in the amount of approximately $6.2 million. This is due to a Measure I reimbursement request sent to SBCTA in December before the holiday closure. A small note on that as well, I would like to point out that this example of a reimbursement request is kind of another notable characteristic of city cash flow. A lot of projects funded with grant funding sources are on the reimbursement basis, so the city will front the cash for expenditures and it replenishes itself at a later date when reimbursement requests are processed, such as this SBCTA request. And it's not uncommon to see a tendency for grant reimbursement cash flows to increase stemming from accounting year-end, fiscal year-end activities. Whenever the city receives payments, whether it be from property taxes or grant reimbursements or otherwise, it is always received into the city checking account first. And then any excess cash not needed for operations is then transferred by staff into one of our investment accounts. And on that note, I'd like to point you back to the top section of the attachment 1. The city currently uses 2 separate investing institutions. We have Public Financial Management, PFM, and the Local Agency Investment Fund, or LAIF. PFM is a large financial advising firm that specializes in managing the investments of public agencies. And LAIF is an investment pool administered by the state treasurer in which only local government agencies are able to invest. On this topic of investments, I would like to mention that in recent years, the city of Yucaipa had moved to an overall investment strategy that favors short-term investments over long-term investments. If you recall, for a period of time, the interest rate environment was such that the short-term investments were actually yielding higher returns than longer-term investments. As an example of this, in September of 2019, a one-year Treasury note yielded 1.76%, while a 10-year note yielded 1.6, which is less and kind of counterintuitive. This is known as an inverted yield curve. This shift in strategy to short-term investments was reflected within the PFM portfolio, as well as in a general shift away from assets in PFM to assets into LAIF. This is because LAIF was returning similar rates to the short-term investments in PFM with less cost. And this shift in strategy was all within investment policy direction. We are still in a low interest rate environment, in fact, even lower compared to a year ago. However, the yield curve is no longer inverted, like I previously mentioned. It's kind of returned to a little more normal state where longer-term investments do return higher yields than shorter-term investments. Given this and the large cash flows the city has recently and will shortly receive that I mentioned from property taxes and the upcoming grant reimbursement, city staff believes this might be an appropriate time to reevaluate our investment strategy. Whether or not we continue with a short-term investment focus, which may indicate we no longer need the services of PFM, or whether we engage with PFM to kind of update our investment strategy under their management. City staff does plan to come soon to the Finance Committee and ultimately to Council to seek direction in making this determination. Lastly, I'll just comment that you also find additional attachments to this report for your reference. The largest one is the complete PFM monthly statement, and the last page that you see attached to this item is the monthly statement from LAIF, and you will be continuing to see these as we turn in our monthly investment reports. With that, I'll conclude my report, and staff is available for any questions you may have.
All right, so are there any questions for Ryan?
I have a couple of questions. So are the property taxes, this deposits, this money that's coming in, is it higher than we expected, or is it the same as it was last year, but it's just coming in all at one time?
It annually comes in that same time frame, in the November, December time frame, and then as Ryan said, again in March, April time frame. And it's pretty similar to what we received in last year's funding.
So it's about the same?
About the same, yes.
So the, everything on this attachment 1, everything in November went down except the money market government select. What's that all about? Everything went down as far as value up to that point, and it went up by $1.2 million.
Yes, I believe this to be a reflection of how I mentioned that the city had decided to pursue a strategy of shorter term investments. So what was happening is that PFM was not reinvesting cash into longer term securities as they matured. And so the funds have been slowly leaving PFM as securities mature and making their way to LAIF. Most recently. So I do believe that the reductions that you're seeing in PFM balance is kind of a reflection of that strategy of moving towards shorter term investments.
And that's what Ryan is referring to in terms of reevaluating, hopefully at the next council meeting, first with the Finance Committee and then with the full council. Now that the interest trends have gone back to normal, is that something that council wants to evaluate again in terms of reinvesting in some of the longer term strategies, particularly with the funding that's coming in from both property taxes and Measure I reimbursement?
Yeah. Are you guys okay with that?
Okay. Is there more, I mean, obviously I think investment in general could be risky, but is there more of a risk on long-term versus short-term investments?
In general, short-term investments are considered a safer investment.
Is there any concern regarding the, impending COVID recession and us investing in more long-term investments and locking up our money?
So if I may, I'll start. That's what we experienced several years ago when the interest rates were inverted, as he described, where the short-term rates were actually higher than the long-term rates. So the risk that we experienced, the results of that risk were that we were in a number of long-term investments with the set interest rate returns. If you kept them in those longer-term investments, if you bought out those longer-term investments, of course, there were costs associated with that. And meanwhile, the short-term interest rates were higher than the longer-term. So that's the only risk. If we continue to leave it in the longer term, those investments in the longer term options, you're still going to realize that return on investment. But it was a unique circumstance over a year ago where the short-term interest rates were actually higher than the long-term.
And Ray, because this is tax dollar, taxpayer money, these investments are highly selective, I want to say. I mean,
Yeah. They're all very risk averse.
Yeah.
Which is why
you're
the
definitely
returns-
not getting these large returns that you
Right.
would in the private sector.
Yeah, you're talking
And
about
that's-
2 to 3%
Right.
returns, and the longer, usually the longer investment portfolio is, a little closer to 3, and the shorter investment portfolio is below 2. But we just had that unusual circumstance here a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago.
And the limitation actually just keeps us right around inflation rates. I mean, we're not getting
That's
much
right.
more than,
That's right.
and it's limited because it is tax dollars.
But it's very risk averse, which is appropriate.
Yes, yes. Any other questions for Ryan? Justin, you good? David?
No, I'm good.
All right, so we have a motion to accept.
I'll make a motion to accept.
All
Is
right.
this a receive and file?
Yes.
We're not going through, do we take a motion on receive and file? Did we change that up?
During my tenure, we decided that a receive and file did not require a vote. However, if council wants to change that.
Just because this is the treasurer's report, let's go ahead and do it anyway, just this time. So we have a motion, we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, anyone opposed? Okay, so that takes us to possible action on pending legislation. Ray, do you have anything?
I have nothing to report this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Luckily, our legislator has been out of session, right? Okay, this takes us to item number 5, and this is Fermin.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. This item is regarding right-of-way acquisition for the County Line Road Corridor Project. This project is made up of many smaller project components to improve County Line Road from Bryant Street to Calamasa Boulevard. And the intent of the project is to address the increase of traffic on County Line Road, specifically during the morning and evening commuting hours. As council is aware, right-of-way from a total of 17 properties is required for the overall project. And to date, staff has been able to reach an agreement with 12 property owners. At the last city council meeting, council adopted the resolution of necessity for 5 other properties related to this project. Since that meeting, 3 of those 5 property owners have contacted the city to continue the negotiations, and staff is optimistic that we'll be able to reach an agreement with those property owners soon and come back to council with a purchase and sale agreement for those properties. The 2 purchase and sale agreements before you tonight are part of the 12 that I mentioned earlier that staff has reached an agreement with, and are for the right-of-way that is required for the intersection improvements at 5th Street and County Line Road. The exhibit on the screen shows the location of those 2 properties. They're both located on the east side of 5th Street along County Line Road. One is a vacant property on the north side, and the other one is on the south side, and it has a single-family residence on that property. This next exhibit shows the layout for the roundabout improvements at 5th and County Line Road and the location of the 2 properties that are the subject of the purchase and sale agreement. The first purchase and sale agreement is for a 2,641 square foot permanent easement from Javier and Daniel Uribe, and that purchase and sale agreement is in the amount of $31,600, and it's for this area highlighted in this purple color here. The second agreement is for a 56 square foot easement from the Bonnie Phillips Trust, and that is in the amount of $5,000, and that is for the 56 square foot area here. These amounts are consistent with real estate appraisals that were completed and previously approved by the City Council. And those amounts, they not only include the compensation for the value of the land, but they also include compensation for any of the private improvements that will need to be removed in order to accommodate the construction of the project. Those were noted as damages on the appraisals that were reviewed and approved by City Council. And it's for this reason that the cost per square foot does vary from property to property depending on what is within the area that is to be acquired by the city. Staff is recommending that council approve the 2 purchase and sale agreements and also approve an expenditure up to $6,000 for escrow and closing costs, and also the amount of $5,000 for administration and staff time for a total cost of $47,600 for the 2 purchase and sale agreements. As staff continues to negotiate with the other property owners, we'll be returning to council with purchase and sale agreements for those permanent easements. The overall project is included in the adopted fiscal year 2021 capital improvement program and is funded by development impact fees, grant funding from the SB1 grant program, Measure I funds, and also pavement management program funds. No general fund monies have been allocated to this project other than there is a small portion of the citywide pavement management program funds. In this case, it's less than 1% of the total project funding. That concludes my report, and staff is available for any questions you may have.
So are there any questions for staff?
Did you say that 4 of the ones that we approved to do the eminent domain had contacted and were possibly going to settle?
3 of the 5.
3 of the 5.
3 of the 5,
really?
yes.
Nice.
It does, yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Justin, do you have anything? No? David?
No, I'm good. I
John?
understand.
Good. All right, so with that, we have a motion to accept.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second. All right, so we have a first and a second.
Yes.
I need to be more clear with this, I forgot. I got David's first, John's the second. All right, so we have first and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, so 5-0. So that takes us to item number, what number are we on? 6. I'm having technical issues here, so. 6 is Mary. Go ahead, Mary.
Good evening, Mayor Bogue and council members. The entertainment goal of each Music and Arts Festival has been to secure high-caliber headline acts featuring a variety of music genres to draw regional visitors to the event and to historic Uptown Yucaipa. In order to book high-caliber entertainment in time for our festival, city staff has been researching and finalizing talent since November 2020 with the Yucaipa Performing Arts Center Entertainment Committee. The 2021 Yucaipa Music and Arts Festival is set to occur on Friday, May 7th from 6 to 10 p.m. and Saturday, May 8th from 12 to 10 p.m. In previous years, the Music and Arts Festival has been a 3-day event. However, the committee approved a schedule change from a 2-day event from a 3-day event to a 2-day event due to low attendance on Sundays. Following the approval of the schedule, the committee also approved a list of talent provided by staff. On Friday, May 7th, the first opening band will be our very own Yucaipa Rockin' Youth Studio. The second opening band will be an all-female Van Halen tribute band called Femme Halen. Our headline entertainment for Friday is Aeromyth, an Aerosmith tribute band. On Saturday, May 8th, the opener will be a local Yucaipa country band called Westward Sons. After working with the talent agency Harbor Productions, we were able to secure Temecula Road, and our headliner, the country music duo Low Cash. I would now like to direct your attention to the screen to view a short video of Low Cash.
I love my boots broken, I love my camo hat. Don't mind a little paint on my jeans, yeah, I roll like that. I love driving my truck across the railroad track. If you hit it too quick, it'll hit you right back. I love a fresh cut field with the first frost on. How it shines like gold when the sun turns on. I love the sound of them wheels, my baby singing along. With boys, the summer comes on. I love my small town world, I love a country girl, I love a Friday night. Man, I love this life, sound of an old dirt road rolling through my mind. Man, I love this life.
The fiscal year 2020-2021 adopted budget includes estimates for YMAF revenues in the amount of $56,000 and expenses in the amount of $125,000 for a net impact to the general fund equal to the amount of $69,000. The remaining expenditures will be used to cover the cost of infrastructure, entertainment on alternate stages, production, and advertisement. City staff is also working on other city events and will return to council at a later date with more details. That concludes my report, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, so are there any questions for staff?
If I may add one comment, this is all, of course, contingent upon governor's guidelines being updated by then. We certainly believe that to be the case. We hope for it, but it's contingent upon that. So.
Okay. Is there any questions for staff? Justin, you have
No, I
any?
think you did a great job securing Low Cash. Good job.
I'm not sure what you just said. So we're going to go ahead and give a deposit to these bands? And then
So-
if the governor decides we can't do it, what are we going to do then?
Well, let me walk through the first question first. So the contract recognizes there will be a potential that COVID-19 guidelines will not allow us to have the event, and we can withdraw from the contract unless I'm mistaken, Megan. Number one. And number two, hopefully that's a bridge that we don't have to cross. But that's the assumption is that the guidelines will change by May, and we'll be able to have an event like this, maybe some modifications, who knows, but an event like this in May. And the challenge we have collectively is that, as you know, planning for a music and art festival in May starts in November. And so it started with the entertainment subcommittee authorizing staff to move forward with offers for these bands. We can't wait till February to have those conversations with the bands, or we'll never be able to have the event in May. So we have to plan for the best case, if you will. And just a reminder that the full council had authorized the entertainment committee to execute that process, if you will. So.
Okay. You good? David, you have something?
I didn't get a clear understanding of Councilor or Mayor Pro Tem's Duncan's question. Can we potentially lose a deposit?
Staff will continue to work with Harbor Productions to make sure that the agreement that we sign prior to signing it states that we will not lose our deposit if COVID-19 regulations do not allow us to have the event.
Okay, that's much more clear. Second question, Femme Halen, is that all-girl group who's been around for a while? They're local ladies?
Yes, they have been at our concerts in the park in years past. They've had different names for different groups that they've pulled together, Totally Go-Go's, Femme Halen, and others as well. They are a fantastic group.
They are great. These guys, all girl, I mean, not to be sexist or anything, but they're just a bundle of talent, and I'm glad that they're here being an opener.
Thank you.
John, you have anything?
I'm good.
No? Good. Bob, are you finished? You have something else?
Yeah, I guess I'm done.
You're
I
good?
guess I'm done.
All right, okay. Yeah, so we had to plan, I'm on the committee, we have to plan in advance. I know, I wish it would be more definitive, but it's tough. I mean, I'm hoping they'll lift the ban sooner than later, so. With that, do we have a motion for item number 6?
I'll make a motion that we approve.
Okay. Bob?
I'll second then.
And John, the second. All right, so we have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, so moving right along to item number 7. Fermin, or is it Fermin?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. This item is the award of contract to provide fabrication services and delivery for the Yucaipa City Yard buildings. With the development of the Oakland Creek specific plan approved by City Council in 2016, and also with the construction of the Wilson 3 Basin project, the city's public works maintenance yard and the record storage facility is being relocated. On the screen before you is the Oakland Creek specific plan, site plan, that shows the Wilson 3 Basin, the residential, the planned residential development to the north and west, and also the 2 innovation areas, one located here on the west side of Bryant Street, just south of Fire Station number 2, and the other area directly behind the Wildwood Calvary Chapel, which is the site for the new city yard. The city yard had been located at the previous site since before the city incorporated, and over the years, residential development has occurred immediately across the street from that location, and the city has received noise and other nuisance-related complaints from the homeowners. The proposed city yard location here is at least 1,000 feet from any existing home over here on the other side of 2nd Street, and at least a couple hundred feet from the nearest planned residence here in this area. This next slide shows the site grading plan for the site, and it shows that it'll have access from Oakland Road between the channel and the Wildwood Calvary Church property. There are 3 structures that are being proposed. There's one main building with the offices, a smaller storage building, and then the L-shaped covered storage area. Again, this site is located just south of the Wildwood Calvary Chapel. And I do want to mention that the city has worked with the church. They work closely with the church during the planning and the design, not just of the city yard, but also the overall Wilson 3 Basin project. The church did provide some input that was incorporated into the design of the Wilson 3 Basin channel improvements, as well as the church layout. And a land exchange agreement was developed and also approved by the city council between the city and the church. That agreement identified land that would be transferred from the church to the city to be able to construct the Wilson 3 channel improvements, which are off the screen here, but the channel improvements are here on the west side of the church property. And in return, the city would transfer land to the church to expand their parking lot. And you could see their existing parking area is here. This area here would be an expanded parking lot for the church. Staff will return to council in the future to finalize that land exchange agreement. In July of 2020, council awarded a contract to Three Peaks Corporation for the grading of the new city yard site. That work is currently being completed, and during the process, the city did contract with Stephen Paul Murray Architects to complete the architectural design for the 3 proposed buildings. That design has been completed, and it is consistent with the architectural design that was approved by the Planning Commission back in 2017. I'll just briefly go through some of the slides that show the architecture of the building. This is the proposed main building, the larger building. This is the smaller building, and this is the covered storage area that is being proposed. In December of last year, staff did distribute a request for qualifications and proposals for the fabrication and the delivery of these buildings. Two firms responded to that request. Western Steel Buildings and also Knight Building Systems responded. City staff evaluated the two submittals using the city's qualifications-based review process, and Western Steel Buildings was determined to be the most qualified. They have completed other similar projects for the city of Yucaipa successfully. One of them was the Dottie Potter Equestrian Arena, and also a building at Yaps. As a result, staff is recommending that council award a contract to Western Steel Buildings in the amount of $331,851 for this project. Staff is also recommending that City Council approve a contract contingency amount of $33,000 and also approve $15,000 for contract administration, permitting, and other costs for the project for a total budget of $379,851. This project, similar to the previous one, is included in the adopted fiscal year 2021 capital improvement program. And the CIP identifies the amount of $1,068,000 in funding for the project. And that funding is comprised of $950,000, which is coming from the proceeds of the sale of the property to Woodside Homes. You may recall that the purchase and sale agreement for that property was before you towards the end of last year. And the funding also includes $118,000 in development impact fee funds for the project. Funding from the general fund is not allocated to this project. The table on page 124 of the agenda includes the cost to date for the overall project. That includes the grading contract, this proposed contract, and other costs that are associated with the project. I would like to note that there was a revision made to the proposed contract agreement, and a revised page 2 of 14 has been distributed to the City Council and is also available in the back of the room. With that, that concludes my report, and staff is available for any questions you may have.
All right, so are there any questions for staff? Justin?
If I'm accurate, I was told there is no business more local to try to keep our tax dollars and monies more local. This is the best option we have, and it's in Utah. Is that accurate?
For this type of project, yes.
Okay.
Bob, you have something?
No, I have no question.
Was our echo or say the same thing, is that, you know, the winner of the bid was from Utah, and the second guy was from Tehachapi. I mean, you would think that'd be somebody closer, but maybe they're just busy with other projects, but it is what it is, huh?
John, you have something?
There we go. Only thing I wanted to know was, what's the difference in the distance from the new yard to the old yard to the residence?
So the old city yard side is here, so the residents are directly across the street.
Right.
So,
Okay.
and here we have almost 200 feet from here to the backyard, the proposed backyard for these homes here.
Okay.
Is that a block wall that's is it a block wall that the residents have on that backside? It usually, I think the code requires it to be a block wall on the perimeter, doesn't it?
I don't know if the code requires it, but I know that the majority of these types of projects have been conditioned to build a masonry block wall by the Planning Commission.
Yeah, I think we've required that in the past with projects. A
Okay.
block wall separating along the perimeter.
Yeah.
That would be something that the Planning Commission would discuss, and in this case, ultimately, council, I think, weighed in on some of that too. So we'll follow up on that to make sure that it was included in the conditions.
I'm sure that would save a lot of future heartache. Anything else, John?
That's it.
You good? Okay. All right, so with that, is there any other questions, or we have a motion?
I move approval.
We have a
I'll
motion.
second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, so moving to item number 8. Landon.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. Thank you. This item before you is for the grading, rough grading contract for the new city yard relocated facility and a proposed change order number 3. Some of the background we heard in Fermin's presentation with respect to the project, which is identified as a separate project in the CIP for the relocation of the existing city yard facilities that were located here to this new location. Similar information regarding the funding with no general fund monies allocated and the funding sources as identified with the sale proceeds of the old city yard property and the public facilities fee fund as identified in the fiscal table. The initial phase, this project is approached with in a phased approach for the construction of the relocated facilities. This initial phase in this construction contract is for the rough grading to establish the rough grades for the new city yard site, including the building pads. If we go to the next slide there, this contract that is currently in progress is for the rough grade for those building pads, the new city yard site, access roads, parking areas, as well as the drainage features to accommodate the drainage for these new improvements. And in addition, as referenced in the previous presentation, that land exchange agreement between the city of Yucaipa and the Wildwood Calvary Chapel Church requires the city rough grade the area for the future planned church expanded parking lot there and some of the associated drainage improvements that tie into the proposed city yard drainage improvements and ultimately connecting to that Wilson Creek channel. The construction contract was awarded to Three Peaks Construction last year, and construction began in late November. During the initial phase of the rough grading, following the clearing and grubbing of the vegetation that was on this pretty large area, the city met with its geotechnical engineering consultant, Hilltop Geotechnical, that was on site to perform the testing in an effort to confirm the grading requirements necessary for the proposed fill, slopes, the church parking lot areas, and any over excavation that may be necessary in order to support the future buildings. Based on the field soil conditions and some exploratory work that we were able to perform with the contractor, additional over excavation was recommended to support some of the future improvements, namely some of these building facilities, some of the fill slopes that support some of these graded areas for future improvements. The church, just as a point of clarification, the church's future planned parking facilities are to be constructed with their phase of improvements, the fine grading, the concrete, and the asphalt work. So the work that's being performed as a part of this contract is ultimately supporting those future planned improvements that the church will perform as a separate contract. Additionally, during the construction of the drainage improvements to accommodate the city yards, drainage modifications were recognized in order to accommodate the drainage from the existing as well as this future expanded parking lot. Ultimately, the plan is to connect them to the Wilson Creek channel. So the grade of that existing drainage matching up with the city's drainage improvements that are being constructed as a part of this rough grading project. Some modifications have been recognized in order to make sure that it functions well, not only in the future, but now in the interim time when there's going to be some rainy seasons between now and when the ultimate channel improvements are constructed. And there's a benefit to construct these improvements now along with the drainage improvements and these additional over excavation requirements. Staff has determined that it's in the best interest to complete this work now. The contractor is fully mobilized on the site as a part of this current project, and it's similar work compared to the existing improvements they're constructing. And again, benefit to make sure that both of these sites can handle the runoff that we anticipate in a rainy season. Sufficient funding, or I'm sorry, city staff has identified these proposed changes. We've worked with the contractor within the current contract bid items and also some analysis on the additional work that is proposed, and has agreed with the contractor to move forward with the proposed change order pending tonight's action in the amount of $49,500 to accommodate these changes into the current phase of the contract. Sufficient funding is available to accommodate this proposed change order, and the approval would allow the project to be completed with these recommendations, and also to formally complete that church-city land exchange agreement with the necessary improvements to accommodate the future drainage, as well as the future phase of the Wilson Creek Channel and Basin project. With that, staff recommends approval of change order number 3 to the construction contract for the new city yard site grading project in the amount of $49,500 for a revised total contract in the amount of $206,304. And that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, so are there any questions for staff? Justin?
No, sir.
Nothing. Bob?
No.
David?
No.
John?
No.
All right. So we're gonna do the grading for that church parking lot. Is that, I mean, I've not heard you.
That's
They
correct.
plan on doing the parking lot at the same time that we're doing the yard? Or is this just something they're gonna do in the future?
They have indicated they will move forward with the improvements at a later date once the rough grading is completed as a part of this project. I'm not sure about their timing of when they'd like that to happen, but I know that they are looking forward to. We've been coordinating with them not only through the process with the land exchange agreement, but also in the field, saving some of the trees that were located along their existing parking lot so that they can replant them in these areas. So they are in the process of planning and working toward getting those improvements in place that would require another contract to do that work.
All right, so with that, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
John, a motion?
I'll second it.
Justin, second. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. So that takes us to item number 9. Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This item is extending the existence of the local emergency. Council has heard this over recent months, and again today. Want to report that the vaccinations are rolling out a little slower than everybody had hoped, I'm sure, but we are starting to experience public safety personnel getting vaccines, both in Sheriff Department, Police Department, and also in CAL FIRE. And so it's starting to be available to our public safety folks, and we expect that as essential workers, that'll move into staff in the next 3 or 4 weeks. At least that's our hope. And all of that in parallel with folks getting vaccinated that are at risk, nursing facilities, et cetera. And so as a society, we are moving in that direction, and certainly in the county, we're seeing the same things, of course, after the medical professionals have been vaccinated first. Don't know that we have, at least as of today, we have not received a response to a letter to the governor's office or the letter that was referenced earlier today relative to the lawsuit. We have started to purchase equipment for the Uptown Park seating that we talked about at the last council meeting, and the potential for parklets that we talked about as well. We will come back to council with folks that are interested in pursuing that along the way, but we've started that process of purchasing the outdoor furniture for that, and of course move forward with the park itself, Uptown Park, I should say. With respect to the El Dorado fire and the continuation of the emergency allows us again to continue to use the CARES Act funding for those things that had been identified in previous council meetings. The one thing that did come out of the federal legislation in the continuing resolution for the budget was extension of time for use of those CARES Act funds, and in particular, those CARES Act funds that we had worked with the county on. CARES Act 3, we characterized it as. We'll have more time to continue to pursue those programs, expenditures related to the CARES Act funding, with the continuation of the emergency declaration. Now, with the El Dorado fire and the flood mitigation, staff has completed Phase 1 mitigation efforts. If council recalls, that was on a 10-day timeframe with the potential for extending it to 20 days. A lot to be done in that 20-day period. Used a couple of contractors through our emergency contracts, purchased additional K-rail, and those improvements have been completed. Another phase, if you will, of NRCS-funded improvements is being worked on with NRCS right now. Longer-term opportunity to expend those funds, and we'll come back to council when we have information relative to the second phase of potential NRCS funding. But again, the emergency declaration is required to continue to pursue that additional funding opportunity, and perhaps FEMA funding along the way as well. Not sure that that's a viable alternative at this point, but we will pursue that as well with an emergency declaration. With that, happy to answer any questions you may have. I think I've covered the highlights of the item. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, so are there any questions for staff?
I have a couple of questions. So this, the slow, the delay in the vaccination, or the, is that logistical, or is that lack of vaccines?
It's, you've read some of the same things I have. We haven't had a city manager's call with the CEO's office in probably 4 weeks now, 3 weeks now. So what I'm about to share with you is probably information that you have available as well. And it appears as though the vaccines have been distributed to states, just the states have had trouble distributing them locally. Our first tranche, I guess is the term that they use, in San Bernardino County was about 15,000 vaccines when they first were rolled out. And they've received additional vaccines since then, and I think even the second company that's distributing them has distributed some vaccines to San Bernardino County as well. So they're rolling out a little faster now, but as I understand it, there's been a kind of a slow process between the state and the counties receiving those vaccines and distributing them, but that the state has some more that have been made available. They're just not getting out to the counties as quickly. I think that may be old news. I think that's changing here rapidly. I think they're starting to get out to the counties more quickly, but that's what I've been that's what I understand.
So that information comes to you through a city manager's meeting with the county?
We have, up until the holidays, we have had typically weekly meetings, conference calls, Zoom calls, conference calls, between city managers throughout the county and the CEO's office. But over the holidays, those were suspended. They'll start up again here shortly.
Justin, you done?
Yeah.
Okay. Justin, you have something?
No, sir.
No? David?
No, thank you.
John?
No, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard that there's been this bottleneck when it comes to getting the vaccines out to everyone, and I heard there's this big push to just to give them to whoever at this point. So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah.
All right. So with that, we have a motion.
Move to continue the declaration.
All right. So we have a motion.
Motion to extend the existence of the local emergency?
Is that your motion?
Yes.
All right. So
And
we
I'll
have a
second that.
All right. We have a motion and a second. So any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. So that takes us, let's see, I guess I get to temporarily adjourn the city council. And I'll
And who's
turn
the
it over
chair?
to
It's me.
Justin.
So we'll call the successor agency to order, and I guess the first step is to approve the minutes from last meeting.
So moved.
I'll second.
First and a second, is there discussion?
There's confusion.
I made the motion.
Either one, either Duncan or me.
They both did it, so Duncan's closer to me. Duncan did it.
I have the arm wrestle over it.
Those are as amended. Yeah, those are as amended as well. Those were handed out this evening.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So item 2, staff have information on this for us?
This is Misty Chang, consultant, financial consultant.
Good evening, Honorable Chairman, Successor Agency Board members. The item before you tonight is the Recognized Obligation Payment Schedule, otherwise known as ROPS, for fiscal year 21-22. The ROPS covers a 12-month period beginning July 1st, 2021, and ending June 30th, 2022. Just to give you some background, because I see there's a couple of new board members here to the successor agency. There was a dissolution of the redevelopment agencies back in 2012. So pursuant to AB 1X26, the successor agency, which used to be the redevelopment agency, is required to prepare and file with the Department of Finance a listing of payments to be made by the successor agency for the upcoming fiscal period. That's why it's fiscal year 21/22, prior to February 1st. This process might be familiar to some of you, as this is the 10th year that the successor agency has had to file the ROPS. And this wind down process again began in 2012. The Countywide Oversight Board is in its 3rd year of existence. Before, it was a local oversight board. The Countywide Oversight Board has allowed the successor agency of Yucaipa to present the ROPS at their January meeting. This meeting actually is going to be occurring this Thursday at January 14th at 9 a.m. at the county. And there was a much more significantly longer process in their submittal and review. So that was already submitted to them several weeks ago. And they have actually, the county has blessed the ROPS as well as the administrative budget that is before you tonight. And then it'll be presented on Thursday at the county. ROPS 21-22 includes debt service payments, both interest and principal portions for the 3 tax allocation bond issues, 1998, 2004, and 2010. The 1998 TAB, or tax allocation bond, debt service payments continue as an obligation until September of 2028. The 2004 tax allocation bond debt service payments continue until September of 2034. And the 2010 tax allocation debt service payments continue until the year 2040, which is the last of the tax allocation bonds. Also, the amounts listed on the ROPS schedule include bond trustee services, bond disclosure services, and agency counsel legal fees. These amounts are also identified for salaries and benefits. Then those are all listed on the ROPS under a category called administrative obligations. The successor agency also has an option of filing what is known as the last and final ROPS. This would be submitted when the successor agency has unwound all its outstanding enforceable obligation issues with the Department of Finance, other than debt service payments. However, We are looking at refunding the tax allocation bonds in order to take advantage of lower interest rates. So therefore, staff recommends that until that is done with the refunding of the bond issues, the successor agency should not be submitting a last and final ROPS. It is recommended that the Board of Directors of the successor agency adopt Resolution 2021-4, approving the recognized obligation payment schedule for fiscal year 21-22 for the 12-month period from July 1st, 2021 through June 30, 2022. This concludes my report, and I will entertain any questions at this time.
Thank you. Any questions from council?
So all debt obligations will, through the entire state of California, should be paid off by 2040? Is that what I understood?
That is correct.
Because 2010 was the last actual bond allocation?
That's correct.
Is it? Okay. But we have others that will be paid off sooner?
Yes, we have the older one in 1998, and that will be paid off, in 7 years, 2028. And then the 2004 issue will be paid off in 2034.
Okay.
Have the two new members of the successor agency been updated on what ROPS are and what they mean and all that happy stuff?
Just tonight and brief conversations leading up to tonight, but we'll have more conversations going forward.
So the governor threatened the county to hold funds if they didn't comply. Do we get any leniency on this payment here? I mean, is it because of this nonsense COVID thing? I mean, has they offered any help on this at all or any?
Nothing that proactively has come from the state relative to the
I knew
repayment
that
of it,
already,
yeah.
but I just wanted to say that.
I know. Had to answer.
I'll move the item if.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, item number 3, administrative budget.
So the next item is the administrative budget for the 12-month period from July 1st, 2021 to June 30, 2022. Staff is recommending that the administrative budget 21-22 be approved. Let me explain. The 2021 adopted budget for the successor agency is actually used to calculate the salary and benefits for the administrative costs for the ROPS 21-22. So it's 1 year prior. The administrative cost allowance, as prescribed under AB 1484, is calculated as 3% of the property tax allocated for enforceable obligations from the Redevelopment Property Tax Trust Fund, otherwise known as RPTTF, by the County Auditor Controller's Office. They allow no more than $250,000 for that administrative cost reimbursement. The proposed administrative budget allocates an amount of $128,000 for the period of July 1st, 2021 through June 30, 2022. This amount is a decrease from the previous year in the amount of 37% and is actually short of that $250,000 maximum allocation by $121,000. It is recommended that the Board of Directors of the successor agency adopt Resolution 2021-05, approving the proposed administrative budget number 2122 for the 12-month period from July 1st, 2021 through June 30, 2022. This concludes my report, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Council have any questions?
I mean, nope, I'm good.
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And with that, I think I get to adjourn the successor agency. so that the mayor can reconvene the city council meeting.
All right, so I'll reopen the city council meeting, and that's going to take us into two study sessions. And the first one is the City of Yucaipa logo.
Mr. Mayor, if I may start us off with this one, just to explain the timing of this effort a little bit, and then Megan Wolf and Margot Mullen will team up on the meat and potatoes of the staff report. They're the experts in this area. But I wanted to at least introduce the concept of how this has rolled out and the timing for it, and the similarity, I guess, to the YPAC branding that you saw in the spring. Some of you saw in the spring when that came to you as well, or maybe it was longer than that ago. I lose track of time. How long ago? 28 years. Yeah, a long time ago. This was kind of a similar process, and I want to recognize the efforts of our marketing committee. Staff has formed a marketing committee made up of mostly mid-managers, and of course Megan's involved as well, and have shown some real initiative in this process as they did with the branding for the YPAC. And as you know, citywide marketing effort is extremely important as we get ready to reopen the economy and update our website. And we've got council-approved funding for commercial marketing and residential marketing. And Caroline Velarde, our economic development analyst, has been reaching out to folks relative to those efforts. And so the branding is an important part of, as you all know, a part of that whole process. And then, of course, with the events coming up as well. What I wanted to talk a little bit about is the timing. As staff was working on this before the holidays and came to me with the step in the process that we are at today, and I just wasn't comfortable moving forward at that time, given that the options were essentially the last meeting for the prior council, the first meeting for the new council with all that goes on at that meeting, or moving it into January, which is what the decision that I made. Looking at the logo in a study session today certainly doesn't, the council certainly has options this evening in terms of suggestions for the logo. We like the existing logo. We like the new logo just the way it is. Those options are all available to you. But I wanted to at least explain a little bit about how we got here and my appreciation for the initiative shown by this marketing committee and they're here tonight, and I think Megan's going to introduce them, and I think they're all here today. So I thought it was important to recognize them as well and their efforts. That self-initiative, especially at mid-management and frontline worker level, is something to be celebrated. So I wanted to share that with you this evening and turn it over to Megan and Martin.
Thank you, Ray. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm here this evening along with the Marketing Committee. At this time, I'd like to introduce the members of the committee. Jason Underwood, who is in charge of the city's YouTube channel and IT. Mary Johnson, who creates graphics for the website and city social media pages, including Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Nextdoor. Caroline Velarde, who oversees marketing the city to potential residents, developers, and businesses. Margot Mullen, who is a graphic designer by education, artist by passion, and created the YPAC logo. These are key staff involved in marketing the city through their everyday responsibilities. Now I'd like to go through a little bit of the history of the city logo. On March 9th, 1990, the logo you see on the screen or on page 197 of your agenda was approved by City Council as the first city logo. Today, we know this as the city seal. In 1992, a former city staff sketched a drawing of snow-capped mountains with the words City of Yucaipa. Again, if I can bring your attention to the screen or page 198 of the agenda packet, you will see what we now know as the City of Yucaipa logo. I'm going to leave this image on the screen as I begin to talk about March 2020. In March of 2020, we entered unprecedented times. As a city, we had to adapt quickly to this change, the change that was going on in the environment around us. We had an obligation to inform our residents of state and county guidelines. We, like many other agencies, use social media, YouTube, and the city's website to get the information out quickly. We began using these forums in new ways we had never used them before. We began making videos. Some of you may remember a message from the mayor. In addition, we began streaming the city council meetings so that members of the public could listen from their home. Quickly, we learned that the city logo had some limitations. If I can bring your attention back to the screen, because this was a hand-drawn image or a hand-drawn picture, you can see the pixelization around the borders of the image. This happens to us when trying to upload it on different platforms or use large files of the image. In addition, the logo is illegible on social media platforms such as Facebook and Instagram. Therefore, we have been using the Explore Yucaipa logo, which was designed by Geographics Creative Lab and approved by City Council in 2014. That logo can now be seen on the screen or on page 199 of the agenda. The goal of creating this logo was an Explore Yucaipa campaign. As the words on the image say, it was a goal to get people to utilize our activities to hike, ride, shop, and dine. Before I pass the presentation over to Margot, I want to once again bring your attention to this screen to show you the YPAC logo that she created in early 2019. The inspiration for this logo was drawn from the natural beauty of Yucaipa's sunsets and sunrises, and I think we can all agree they are gorgeous. This color palette complements the craftsman style of building as well. In addition, the inspiration is drawn from both the outdoor and indoor stages. The YPAC is a space where people come to be in the spotlight, and this logo shows that. The triangle shapes in the logo pay homage to the craftsman style of arts and crafts movement and emulate the shapes of the mountains for which Yucaipa is known. The strong and bold typeface chosen for the YPAC typeface creates a timeless feeling of strength with movement. The typeface has triangle-like cutouts that create a sense of movement and whim, offering the idea of performance and movement. As, like Ray said earlier, we begin to reopen the city and move towards residential and commercial growth, it is imperative that our logo evolves. A city logo needs to be vibrant enough to catch the attention. It should not be specific to placemaking, but flexible so that businesses can envision themselves here. It should pique the interest of prospective developers, businesses, and families. Finally, a logo should leave people with a lasting impression, an impression that we care and want you here. Here is Margot to talk about the logo being presented this evening.
Thank you, Megan. Good evening, Mayor and council members. In the spirit thanks. The inspiration for this proposed logo is the natural beauty of the landscape of Yucaipa. I know for myself and for many people who either live, work, or play here, Yucaipa's open-air parks and jaw-dropping views are one of the many reasons why people keep coming back and have stayed in the area for so long. This timeless proposed logo brings together Yucaipa's strength, beautiful parks, and rugged outdoor lifestyle. As a team, we have gone through 5 revisions. This gave the logo an opportunity to develop along its own journey as we truly worked together as a team and communicated with each other on ideas such as color, composition, meaning, history, and more. As a team, we reflected on what comes to our minds when we think about Yucaipa. We all had different words. However, all of those words centered around being outdoors, being with our families, and going to cultural events like YMAF. Through this process, Yucaipa, the Green Valley, was our guiding light. And ironically, this design journey brought us to what you see here today. As you travel through the valley, you see the amazing landscape and the multiple layers of the mountains dominating your vision. So you will find in front of you a folder, and in this folder is an example of a proposed branding identity kit. This kit helps to illustrate the ways this proposed logo could be implemented. So first, you will see the primary logo. This proposed logo could be used in a variety of ways for marketing and branding the city. The primary logo is identified with 4 major design elements: the mountains in the 3 different hues, and underneath those mountains, the word Yucaipa, which is a strong craftsman style typeface that embodies that craftsman style, which supports the architecture of the city. Next is the word California. This is illustrated in a script font that really mimics the movement of the mountains. The last design element in this logo is the established 1989. And this shares our history and starts to tell the story of Yucaipa from where we started to where we are today. As we move on to this next section of the branding board, you'll see the 2 secondary logos. These 2 logos could be used in a variety of ways, for which the primary logo will not be a best fit. Our next logo is the favicon, and this is our social media logo. You will always see this proposed logo with the words City of Yucaipa. Our third section here is our color palette, and as you will see, these colors honor many of the different places and spaces around Yucaipa. I will never forget when I was driving in Crafton Hills, I saw my first Roadrunner. This color palette will help guide the marketing materials, giving the team a variety of hues to work with, however, still staying within that same color range. Our fourth section here are the fonts. Similarly to what I expressed above, the script font will be utilized for marketing, and it will continue to support that visual idea of the mountains in our branding. And the Minion Pro here is what we are proposing for copy font. Lastly is the mood. So this section visually shows and shares the feelings of the color palette and really reinforces the design decisions in the logo. Yucaipa is one of the most beautiful towns in California with an incredible community, and this proposed logo illustrates those attributes. Staff is currently working on a city website, and this illustrates, this is our current one. And so we are currently working on this on a website here, and this is a physical mock-up utilizing that branding board. So this is our tool to help us guide to create these marketing materials. So as you will notice, when you visit the homepage, all of the photography that will be used will be in that same color palette and same tonal range. Next, you will notice that secondary logo that's up at the very top of that left side right up there. And so that is being used because the primary logo is not the best fit for that space. So you will see all of the colors that are on the website will be directly in line with the branding board, from icons to any of the copy that you see on the website. It will all be reinforced utilizing this toolkit, the branding board. And so now I will hand the presentation over to Megan.
As you have seen.
Megan, can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
Really quick.
Yes.
So the original brand or whatever it is, logo, are we still going to keep that for the imprint? So when we do bridges and things, that'll stay the same? We're not actually, this is just the digital logo we're looking at changing?
Yeah, the next step in this process is talking about how that logo is utilized. You know, whether it's on letterheads and business card, the new logos on letterheads and business cards, but what will the old logo look like? Like you mentioned, we have them on monuments. So if we were to make a new monument, city council can direct staff how they want to move forward with
We
that.
can keep the old one if we like. Okay.
You get to do whatever you would like.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in.
It's all right. So as you can see, the proposed logo is versatile and addresses the needs of the city. This concludes our presentation. This is a study session, and staff are now seeking your direction on how you would like us to proceed.
All right, sorry I jumped too soon. All right, so this is a study session. I have zero artistic ability, so maybe I'll defer this to Justin. You look like you're... I'm kidding.
So I received this logo on Thursday when I picked up my packet, and don't be mad at me. I wasn't sold. So, but I want to highlight something though. Your presentation, you got me a lot closer. Okay, you guys did a bang up job on the presentation, and honestly, you're close. I think in my mind, if this was the Justin show, you guys would be so close. But if you could, can we go back to the current website? I want to highlight something. Okay, and I've said this over the last 10 years of my life. That peak right there, it's visible from all over Southern California, as far away as LA County. You can see that peak, but it doesn't look like that peak except for in our valley, and it looks just like that. And it's always been a welcoming sign of home to a lot of people. Okay, for me, and I'm certain I'm not the only one. Your presentation changed my mind in a lot of ways, but my only suggestion, if I could offer anything, is these hills. I like the colors, I like everything about them, but they look too much like just rolling hills to me, and they don't encompass that monumental, national forest peak that is always over our beautiful Green Valley, and keeps the desert winds from coming our way. I mean, I think there's a lot that can be said about that mountain, and I think this old logo embodies it. Then this one looks more like rolling hills to me. So if there's a way we can somehow encompass or combine the two to highlight that we are a forward-thinking community that is keeping in line with the times. We're aware of our marketing needs, but we do recognize that geographically we're unique. Culturally we're very unique, and we want to protect that as well. So with that, that's my input.
I just want to say to that comment, we actually all agreed. That was part of we were trying to recreate that peak. And it's because you're not the only one that says that. People that grew up here, but people also that moved here or maybe go up to Oak Glen periodically, or avid hikers like Landon, they know those peaks. So.
All right.
Just for clarification on that, you don't feel like this here reflects that?
I don't.
Okay.
I think I see that, obviously that dark green peak in the back is supposed to represent a much larger mountain that is sitting behind the I forget the word, the layers. I forget the words you use, and forgive me, but you did an amazing job. You hit it on all levels, but you used a term regarding layers or something. And I think if we can bring that green mountain, and bring it more to be that peak that we see in that picture off to the right there, that would be, like I said, if this was the Justin show, that's what I would want to see on our city websites.
Well, this is the Justin's.
Well,
Justin show.
1/5.
All right. You good? You good? All right. Good input. Bob, you have something?
Well, that was a great presentation. I I think if anyone wasn't sure about what they wanted, you did a good job in trying to convince them that this is what we want. When I got this in my packet, I wasn't, I told you this already, but the colors in this washed out copy here is not at all what this looks like, and I like it a lot. I could go with the whole mountain thing. I mean, clearly that's monumental Yucaipa is that peak. But the way this looks on letterhead is pretty amazing. The way it looks on the business card is pretty amazing. So I would say that with that suggestion, somehow making that part of it, it looks good.
All right. David, do you have anything?
Yes, I do. Thank you for your presentation. But I kind of, no, I don't kind of, I do agree with Councilmember Beaver's comments. One of the things that I believe in is consistency, and I'm going to be that naysayer of this. We have branding, and even in your opening statements in the background, it's a well-recognized logo that we have right now. And you're telling me that there is no way that you can improve the graphic design of the original Yucaipa logo. I mean, we can put it in cursive, and we can manipulate that, but I guess there's a way that we can't manipulate the mountainside or the peak, which is San Bernardino, by the way. That's Mount San Bernardino. Is there any way that we can fix that, or is it that we're looking for a whole different approach? And I want to also say that this picture here actually is warm and inviting, in my opinion. And everybody who gets off the freeway at Oakland Road sees that Mount San Bernardino, and it is it's a perfect mountain. And that's a landmark that I tell people, go, if you want to go to my house, head towards that hill, and you'll get there. This, and I don't mean to be rude, people, but whatever artistic ability I have, which is minimal, it doesn't reflect the same warmth as the one that we currently have. I see a little more starkness out of this. And even though the colors are beautiful, and it is, I mean, it's nice, but it doesn't, to me, it doesn't reflect Yucaipa. Something more warm and inviting such as this. This is, I mean, it's, to me, the direction that the word goes, it's more uplifting, psychologically, with the beautiful mountain scene in the background. And this is a little bit more stark with 3 different kinds of fonts. So, I'm not too keen on this model. Maybe if we had something similar to what Councilmember Beaver said, where we can incorporate Mount San Bernardino, which is really I mean, that's a perfect mountain when you come up Oakland Road or get off the freeway. You see that, you're in Yucaipa, and people, my friends and family comment on the beauty of the scene. So,
David, can I jump in here really quick? My proposal was that we don't get rid of this one, because I think we need to keep this for monuments and things that we already have out and actually keep this. And then this new one is mostly just a digital update, correct? For digital marketing and so forth?
but then see, we're splitting again. I'm not so much into splitting.
Okay, well,
And that's my opinion.
Okay.
Who are we? So we got to have one, in my mind, just one vision. And, well, anyway, but we can, it's never, if the David show was, might be different, but I'm only
David showed
1/5 of
also.
a person, so, of the council. So whatever the council wants, I just think I just need to express my feelings.
All right, now it's the John show.
Well, I do appreciate your presentation as well. I have to agree with some of the things that the other councilmen have stated already. When I first saw this logo, part of me thought it was a little, maybe not clean as far as, it looked a little cluttered to me. And maybe that's the mountains that we're already talking about. But I also, something that David brought up is we want to keep, I think, one logo, keep it consistent across the board. So if we can have a logo that is digitally good, that we don't have to go back and forth between 2 or 3 different variations of it on the different platforms, whatnot. I don't know if that's impossible to do, but I think if we stay consistent, that would be better for recognition as people see things, they know exactly what they're looking at. My personal opinion.
All right, so do you guys have direction
I think we maybe need a little bit more,
from me?
yeah, clarification on a few things, but we do understand that
Well, my position was the original logo, just because I see it all over the city and the imprints of the bridges and the monuments. I just see, I'd hate to see us to change it.
yeah,
But-
we,
so I-
just for clarification, we do not want to change any, we agree,
Yeah,
that's
no.
our history, and David saying the things that he said, that's what a logo should do to you.
Right.
It should make you very passionate.
And I understand what Justin says here, changing up this one. I think it looks fine. I have no artistic ability, so whatever you come up with. I'm
And
okay.
I want to mention one more thing. Part of the logo process is that we do have to copyright this logo. We never copyrighted the City of Yucaipa logo back in 1992 or any year thereafter. Therefore, you'll see it, the same logo used a lot of places throughout town. I'm sure there's a few businesses you can think of off the top of your head that you drive by and they've got our logo on this huge 8x10 banner, and there's a lot that goes into a logo. You're not supposed to stretch it certain ways. Technically, you're not supposed to use it on certain pieces without the permission of who created it. And so that is a process, regardless of what we choose. That is a process city staff will go down once a decision is made on the logo.
Okay.
In the terms of marketing, from a marketing perspective, I mean, aside from not being able to digitize that very well, I mean, that's a marketable image. That is in my mind Yucaipa, and it's something that the city can, and the city manager can market our city to investors and to businesses who are looking to come here. So I want to make sure I clarify. I'd rather have that as well if we can make that work. And I'm not techie, so if the tech geniuses in the room say, yeah, that it cannot be done, okay. My second choice would be to try to make this image look more like that, with to represent the city. And to Councilmember Avila's point, even the font of the word Yucaipa is also iconic, and something that just to keep consistency should be looked into as well.
All right, so do we need anything
Sounds
else?
like we should probably come back to you again with some updates and another study session. Is that?
That would be wise.
Okay.
We're good?
I think so.
All right, so moving on, that was just a study session. So now we're moving to item number 11. The housing element. Ooh, Ben, are you in charge of the housing element?
While Ben's getting settled there, we also have Mark Hoffman on the phone, I believe. If you could.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm here.
Our consulting housing element expert.
And for the record, I do have a public comment.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. Tonight, we're going to be conducting a study session regarding the housing element update and seeking direction from the City Council on potential avenues to go in order to kind of help establish a framework for meeting our regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA, as part of the upcoming housing element update. As council may recall, on January 13th, 2020, the City Council did approve a professional services agreement with PlaceWorks, a planning consultant firm, to help facilitate the city's housing element update. Since that meeting and then a subsequent study session, that was provided in January 27th, 2020 about some of the housing-related legislation that impacts the housing element update. Staff and Placeworks has been working to help better understand our current status with where we will stand with the upcoming housing element cycle, and then some metrics or methods to help make sure that we are compliant with state law and can complete a housing element and sites inventory that is required by state law. And Mark Hoffman is on the phone to help us through the slides. And Mark, as you get through one slide, just let me know when to switch to the next one, and I'll be happy to do so.
Okay, Ben. So how about if we just start off on slide number 3? And hopefully next time we'll be on Teams or Zoom, and it'll be just a little bit easier here. So are you on slide number 3 with the background?
That I am.
Okay. So some of this information, and again, I just want to appreciate the opportunity to talk with you again, although it is remotely here about the housing element, and kind of continue our ongoing dialogue about housing, how it fits your city's plans, and also how it will help with your general plan in terms of keeping your general plan up to date. So in terms of the background, I'm going to provide some information. Some of this will be review for those of you who have heard it before, but there may be others in the audience that need a bit of a refresher course. So please pardon me if we've covered it already. We just want to keep everybody, lockstep and key, just have them so everybody's updated as we go throughout this process. But in terms of the background, as you know, state law requires the general plan to have an adopted housing element, and that it needs to be in compliance with state law. And when your general plan was adopted back in 2014, it did include a housing element which was deemed in compliance with state law at that time. And the housing element is required to address basically your housing needs of all your residents in the community of all income levels, from the lowest to the highest. As Ben has noted, a critical piece of the housing element is the regional housing needs allocation. And rather than go into depth, just to say that the city must be able to accommodate it fully, and we'll talk a little bit about how that happens. But it is important to note that the housing element is one of those pieces of the general plan, which is extremely important. There's more legislation on housing elements than there are of any other part in the general plan. And it also can be a source of, it can be an issue for cities if they do not obtain a certified housing element. So the next slide, please. This is about the regional housing needs. As Ben has mentioned, every 8 years, the Southern California Association of Governments is required to use housing and employment projections from the state as a whole, determine what the housing needs are, and then allocate those housing needs through different jurisdictions throughout Southern California. And for the 2021 to 2029 planning period of about 8 years, SCAG has assigned the city about 2,859 units. That's the current number that you have. There are appeals being surfaced at SCAG right now. We don't know what the outcome of those appeals will be, or whether units will be moved inland or back to the coast. But presently, it's at 2,859. And what you see there in the chart is the different income levels of the regional housing needs number, which is 2,859, and it breaks it down for a household of 4 into different income limits. So, for example, if you look at the very low, that applies to the allocation is 705 units, and that would apply and would be affordable to households earning up to $40,700 per 4-person household. And you can see the breakdowns there. Okay, next slide, please. In terms of key legislation, there's really 2 pieces of key legislation that I wanted to highlight here, although there are more, and we talked about them earlier when we briefed you on housing element legislation back in January of 2020. But it's really SB 330. And what that's designed to do is to ensure that there's no net loss in residential capacity. So basically, simply put, whatever residential capacity that the city had as of January 1st, 2018, the city is not allowed to reduce that capacity without making it up someplace else. So it's not possible to amass downzone areas of the city or put in growth control limitations unless additional capacity is added elsewhere in the city. And that's because of the statewide housing crisis and the lack of housing. The state legislature imposed that. That is effective till approximately, I believe, 2025, which at that point it may be renewed. So the second key piece of legislation is AB 166. And that really refers to a no net loss within the RENA income category. So if you remember those four income categories that I showed you, very low, low, moderate, and above moderate, those correspond to various density levels in the city. And what this state law does is it says we must always have enough land available to meet those income categories within the planning period. So there's no point in time where a city could simply say, you know what, we're not going to build above moderate income housing. Can't do that because it wouldn't be addressing the deficit in that area. And the same thing with low income, the same thing with moderate income. There always has to be enough sites to meet whatever unmet RENA there is. So those two, I think those two laws are kind of fundamental for understanding what's happening with the RENA. A third one, and I want to talk about this perhaps, or maybe you can just refresh yourself by looking at it, is AB 1397, and that deals with the site inventory, and in a particular provision that we want to talk a little bit about later. So going to slide number 7, and how do we plan for the RENA? There's really three different ways. There's lots of subcategories, but the basic three ways that cities plan to meet the RENA is to, first of all, look at all the approved and proposed residential projects, whatever's coming down the pipeline, and that can be built by 2029, you can take credit for right off the top. And we do have a number of units and projects that fall into that category. Secondly, most cities are not able to satisfy the entire RENA. Frankly, many are not even close, and there's a deficit. So the next step would be to identify sites, either vacant or underutilized, that are zoned at appropriate densities to accommodate housing. And there's a formula that drives that, but essentially it's finding sites where housing can be put. And then the final one, and jurisdictions don't use this very often because of the legal challenges and the financial difficulties of doing so, is to extend affordability of existing affordable housing through long-term covenants. It's a complicated statute, and we can talk a little bit more about it, but essentially it's looking at your affordable housing, which has been publicly assisted, and establishing long-term financial commitments, 40 to 55 years, depending upon the project, to obtain credit for a portion of those units. So going to the next slide, the RENA credit slide. And so it would be option number 1, RENA credits. So the chart that you see before you is, it shows what the RENA is, which is highlighted in darkish green, and the credits that you currently have in your pipeline projects. And what this chart shows is that if you counted all the pipeline projects that are out there, you've met the above moderate income requirement. There are some caveats. You've met about half the moderate income, and that there's still a significant number of housing units that still need to be addressed in the low income. Now, there are some assumptions behind this. Many of the projects in the above moderate income are tentative track maps. They could be maps out there that housing hasn't been built yet, but they've been approved. And should those sites become infeasible, obviously that would be, we would no longer be able to credit that toward progress. But as it stands presently, this is what your development pipeline projects and your would show. So the next slide shows where is that residential project pipeline. And city staff prepared this map, and you can see in the green all of the approved residential projects throughout the city, and they're quite considerable. There are also a number of in-process residential projects. And again, this map was prepared. Obviously, it changes over time. Some of the approved residential projects might be in process right now in terms of having their entitlements. But nonetheless, this map shows, generally speaking, where most of those are. It also shows the vacant areas that are zoned for RM24 or R24. That corresponds to your very low and low income requirement. So why don't we go to the next slide, which is number 2, which would be the suitable housing sites. So we know that, and what this chart shows is that you can meet all of your above moderate income requirements should the projects that have been identified come to fruition. Secondly, it also shows that the moderate income unit RENA can be met, as well as the lower income unit requirement as well, because you can see in this table, which says RENA deficit, there is no RENA deficit provided that pending projects are built and provided that the Freeway Corridor Specific Plan is accepted as a site for affordable housing. I did want to just have a little bit of a sidebar on the Freeway Corridor Specific Plan, because I think it's very important to understand how many of the members, the linchpin really is getting that accepted. So if you could just bear with me while I kind of give you a little bit of a history. If you recall back in the 2008 to 2014 housing element, that was the fourth cycle, HCD required and the city adopted the Freeway Corridor Specific Plan. And at that time, they identified about 40 acres for multiple family housing. Amendments were made to allow that as a by right use at 24 dwelling units per acre. And because that was actually accomplished as part of that element, the housing element back in the fourth cycle was deemed compliant. When we got to the 2014 and 2021 housing element, the fifth cycle, that was during the general plan update. And as you recall, the state was coming out of a recession. The freeway corridor had not been developed in a number of years, and frankly, nothing much was getting developed at that time. As required by HCD at that time, the City Council committed to updating the specific plan, including addressing infrastructure, and the housing element included a program. There was not a date required for when that update would occur, or any specific analyses that were required. Anything would come out of just a normal update to the specific plan. One of the key changes in state law that's occurred since then was effective in 2018, which was SB 1397. And what it did was detail new regulations for what we can count toward the RENA. And among many of the requirements, state law was significantly strengthened to require either the provision of infrastructure or a plan to do so. And as part of our briefing in January 2020, we were still, frankly, bullish. I was still bullish on using the original sites in the freeway corridor specific plan. I mean, you have an upcoming specific plan update. You've got a great SKIP program that you've started, a history of addressing infrastructure deficiencies, strong history of affordable projects, and others actually boded well for success. In June of 2020, however, HCD published guidelines for interpreting state law for infrastructure and services, suggesting that the infrastructure must not only be planned, but has to be available during the planning period of 2021 to 2029, but no specific date was provided. So the question that really comes to our mind is that what is going to happen? Are they going to require infrastructure early in the planning period? Or are they going to require infrastructure right at the end of the planning period? Because obviously, your planning period goes from 2021 to 2029. That's 8 years. And so knowing when they're going to require that, I think, is germane for the freeway corridor. And it also gives reason to why we're discussing a lot of these options today. If for some reason the state does not allow those sites to be counted because of infrastructure, then it's germane to have alternative plans for where we might provide for housing. So that's just to give you kind of a backstory on why we're here and why this particular juncture is so important for getting the housing element to the next step. So let's go to the next slide then, goals and evaluating sites. So after talking with city staff, we came up with at least 4 goals in evaluating the sites that need to be chosen or considered for the housing element. I'll just go through this briefly, but basically, number one, we want to maintain flexibility. In the end of the day, we want to have flexibility in the freeway corridor specific plan. So should other types of uses be anticipated or other types of contingencies like state law occur, we've got flexibility to change the plans, and to modify the plans to fit the economy or your overall goals for where you would like to go. Secondly, we want to make sure that we're selecting sites carefully. They need to be well selected, not just plopped anywhere, but sites that are designed for housing. The third criteria is to create a buffer, and this follows HCD's guidance that there should be at least 15 to 30% more sites available for housing than the RHNA requires. And then finally, we want to make sure that regardless of where housing is located, that there's enough tools and controls in place so it's designed well and it's built well, because whatever we build today, frankly, is going to be there long after we retire and most likely generations to come. So moving to the next slide on the Avenue E Oakland site. I only put this slide out there because this is a slide that the city has been pursuing aggressively with grants from HCD, and will continue to have in the housing element. It is a fundamental housing site that we think has an excellent chance of being approved, and it would yield 150 to 200 units maximum for that eight-acre site, and that will be included in our projections. So going to the next slide, options for increasing capacity. So the options for increasing capacity, remember, would be necessary if the state does not accept in full or in part the Freeway Corridor Specific Plan. And we've identified 4 options. There's probably more, but these are the largest 4 options that come to mind. First is with the Uptown. You've adopted a specific plan. You've had great success in getting housing put there with the senior project. This would this would amend that specific plan to permit new housing at up to 24 DUs per acre without the development opportunity reserve. And it would be to make it by right. Secondly would be mobile homes. And this really involves 2 things. This would be encouraging conversion of existing mobile home sites that are under your overlay 3 to facilitate longer-term quality affordable housing. Other options would be to permit additional mobile home units or preserve those with long-term affordability covenants. And we'll get into that later. Third would be accessory dwelling units. State law has been significantly amended and significantly opened up in terms of the ADUs that could actually be encouraged within a city. And we're finding this to be a successful tool for a variety of cities where ADUs are a desired policy. And then fourth, rezoning select commercial sites or upzoning sites near Yucaipa Boulevard or within the federal opportunity zone for multiple family units. And we'll get into each of these options in detail momentarily. So Ben, just want to make sure we're on option number 1, the Uptown.
Yes, we are.
Okay, so in terms of, I'm going to talk about very briefly the benefits, the cons, and the recommendation. And obviously there's more detail involved, but for brevity's sake, I'm just going to hit the mountaintops with a general description. And if you have any questions, we can talk about the specifics. So in terms of the Uptown, it's our observation that modifying the specific plan would allow the city to better capture development capacity, which is already built into the specific plan, but also get RHNA credit in a more streamlined and consistent process. The cons for this approach is that it would be critical to identify the sites now, and any rezoning or code changes that would be required to facilitate that development would have to occur within the first 3 years of the planning period. Of course, there are some strict rules when it comes to using underutilized sites in the downtown, and that would be something that we would have to navigate with HCD. But the recommendation that we're putting forth that if you wish to pursue the Uptown, it would be to remove the development opportunity reserve process and allow a base of 24 dwelling units per acre rather than 16 as the base density in the mixed use and limited mixed use districts, and also establish a by right process. Quite a bit packed in there, but it's essentially making those sites more countable toward the RHNA. And there's also economic benefits that would result from injecting more rooftops into the downtown as well, in terms of having those rooftops near businesses and having the patronization that occurs and whatnot. So there are some short-term and long-term economic development benefits. So let's go to option 2A. So option 2A, we know that the city has a long-term rent stabilization policy for mobile homes and have actually been successful in keeping those mobile homes affordable for many of your lower income residents. What this option is to extend the long-term affordability covenants on those units in an effort to ensure that they remain affordable, but also that they get RENA credit. There are some cons that are associated with that. Guaranteeing the affordability of mobile home parks, you obviously have to have a partner willing to have the covenant, and there could be potential significant long-term city financial commitment. The option is also limited to 250 units for this planning cycle. So one of the things you would need to weigh is a significant financial commitment that might result from a 55-year covenant with the 250 units that you might receive for very low and low-income housing for this planning cycle. Our recommendation currently is to count the 30 new mobile home sites that have been approved at the Lakeview Mobile Home Park, and then include policies to address the development of a long-term strategy for existing mobile home parks that you wish to preserve. It doesn't commit you to actually financially preserve them, but study it further for its realistic feasibility. So moving to option 2B, we know as part of the general plan update that a new NHP 3 overlay was added to examine different mobile home parks that could benefit from conversion to other residential uses in the future should the market be attractive for property owners. This option would pursue that further. One of the cons of this site would be that there has been new state law that's been passed that whenever a low-income unit or a unit that's occupied by a low-income resident is replaced by new development, or I should say is demolished for new development, that it needs to be replaced in some fashion. So that is definitely a con with, it's a constraint associated with this program. But our recommendation at this point would be to consider the removal of the development opportunity reserve process on mobile homes and allow 24 dwelling units per acre as the base density in this overlay and establish a by right process for residential development. There will be, it's uncertain how HUD will react to this proposal, since it's probably something that they haven't seen yet. But the opportunity is still out there to test that option and see to what extent the city can receive RENA credit for this action.
And if I may, Mark, just add in, so the Mobile Home Park 3 Overlay District covers 7 mobile home parks within the city. And then as similar to kind of the Uptown Core specific plan provisions, the base density with that overlay is 16 dwelling units per acre with the ability to go to 24 DU with that opportunity reserve. So it's a very similar structure right now as what the Uptown has. And so then the changes proposed would be very similar as well for both the Uptown specific plan and the Mobile Home Park 3 overlay to hopefully help unlock some of those units.
Yeah, and in something like this, the way we understand state law as it's currently written, although it may be interpreted differently as we move through the process, it would be the net increase in units would be the yield. And so that will be a key question, whether we get the total units or whether we only get the net increase in units. And it remains to be seen. So the third option.
So really quick, we have, do we have 2 or do we have 3 or 4 options that we need to discuss?
There'll be kind of overall 4 different options. Option 2, which is the mobile home parks, is kind of split into 2 different topics. One is more whether or not the city would like to pursue establishing longer-term covenants with participating parks, and the commitment that's required for that. This was based on council inquiries at prior study sessions to try to get credit for existing units we have. And then the 2B is more of, with our conversion ordinance that we have in place, how we can possibly unlock maybe some of those units in that net delta that would be allowed, and perhaps sell to HCD that some of that should be counted as well.
So should we listen to the rest of the options and then discuss them, or do you want to discuss them as we go?
I think perhaps what we could do is go briefly through the next 2 options, but maybe not in great detail. Ben?
That'll
Yeah,
work.
I think that's fair.
Okay.
And maybe, because we could skip all the discussions of sites, or at least go through them extremely quickly, because I think we don't need all the site descriptions to talk about.
Okay.
Okay.
But if it starts to get muddy, I'm fine with changing directions on it. There's a lot of information packed in. So option number 3 is accessory dwelling units. And what we found is that with the state law changing and allowing ADUs by right, cities are increasingly using and proposing an ADU strategy to obtain credit toward the RENA, particularly because those units are oftentimes affordable to very low and low income residents of the community. And what I'm seeing in the housing elements that I'm working with in the various cities, I've seen cities range from 100 to 400 units in terms of obtaining credit. However, the higher the number of units, the more commitments are typically required to obtain those high levels. And so the question here, I mean, we would recommend that you would continue having an ADU strategy, but it would be set at a floor of 100 units credit, unless there's a strong commitment to pursuing and encouraging and facilitating accessory dwelling units in the community. We do know that SBCTA is going to have a program that puts together prototypes for those types of units. I think our question here is what extent you would like us to rely on those for RENA credit, and which is, and what is a number that is actually feasible and realistic. So option number 4 is sites along Yucaipa Boulevard. We know that right now residential, there's a high demand for residential, and we've seen definite interest along the corridors, along Yucaipa Boulevard or near Yucaipa Boulevard for converting excess or underutilized commercial space to residential uses. And so this is a recommendation to consider which sites may or may not be appropriate for conversion to residential. We know that there's 2 sites that are currently converting. The question is, should the other sites be converted as well? And it looks like we've got another option is just really to look at the opportunity sites as well that are south of the boulevard. You do have an opportunity zone within the city, and that may offer some opportunities to upzone some properties as well to get multiple family housing. So at this point, I wanted to breeze through the sites very quickly, if that works for you, just to get a sense of what kind of sites we were thinking about along Yucaipa Boulevard. And again, in all of these sites that we're showing, a trade-off has to be made, obviously, between those sites which are critical to leave intact for future commercial development or for revenue generation purposes versus residential purposes. So the first site would be Yucaipa Boulevard at 11th Street. It's about a 6.5 acre site that could be proposed for R24. And I'm going to move through these, RM24. I'm going to move through these fairly quickly. Site number 2, Yucaipa Boulevard in 14th. There are 3 parcels there that could be proposed for residential as well. Moving to site number 3, this is moving toward the west end of town. This is about 7 acres, could also be proposed for multiple family development. Site number 4, moving either further west, would also be proposed potentially for multiple family development, yielding about 100 units roughly. And then finally, there are 2 sites that are really far south of the boulevard along 3rd Street. These are 2 projects that were proposed in the past, but they never moved to completion. But we thought, based upon their location, they may be appropriate for multiple family uses. One is the one that we show here, could yield about 100 units. And then directly east of that, there's another site that also could yield approximately 100 units. And then moving to the final slide, where it says summary of candidates.
Mark, if I may interject as well, just for reference, this was some elevations that were provided as a conceptual design that could be done within one of those opportunity sites. And so I just wanted to
Who
present that to
provided
City
those
Council.
elevations?
What?
Where did they come from, the elevations?
One of the property owners in the opportunity zone had worked to get these on some ideas, if that was to move forward. And then Mark, you can continue.
Okay. And so then finally, it looks like I don't have that in my PowerPoint here, so I apologize for that. I skipped that over. And then finally, for the summary of the candidate affordable workforce sites, we've listed 6, totaling about 30 acres and ranging from about 600 to 700 units. There are more sites that could be considered, and we have a couple additional sites that we haven't even included here that are also still on the block. Obviously, the Crafton College overlay site is another important site, and there are a few remaining as well. But I think this gives you a sense of the breadth and the depth of the sites that we're proposing, should the freeway corridor specific plan site not be accepted by HCD. And also just want to make a caveat, if they were not accepted by HCD for the 6th cycle, that doesn't mean they would not be accepted at all. It may just be that they say that we need to use those and reserve those for the 7th cycle.
So Mark,
So that
I
really
do have a public speaker I would like to bring in at some point. So can I call up Travis Heaps?
Sure.
Travis, can you give us your name and your address? I forgot to say that to my original speakers, but
Hi,
we'll start here.
My name is Travis Heaps, and I live at 34259 Via Buena Drive, and I represent Premium Land Developments. We are the property owner for that property off of 3rd Street on the western side at 12863 3rd Street that they had identified. Those were our elevations that we gave to Ben that he put up for us. Those are conceptual elevations. So right now it's being designed for a senior market rate apartment complex. Initially, it was approved for an 18-unit single-family project. However, there was no construction activity that ever took place with it. So we have since acquired it and have begun redesigning the conceptual aspect of it to better fit have a more efficient use of the land. So we believe that by establishing this property as RM to allow for a by right application process, we believe that this will incentivize the project to the point that it is feasible from a developer standpoint. And additionally, I think the same applies to the other vacant properties that are within the opportunity zone, including the parcel directly east from this property, as well as about a 3-acre parcel that's located on the east side of 4th Street, just north of Avenue E, I believe. And then we believe that these incentives, in addition to the opportunity tax, and then the opportunity to do the by right land use application, we believe that this will help to assure, or at least increase the odds that these potential projects will actually be constructed and completed during this next housing cycle. And so I also have a couple other notes regarding, it's not necessarily about this particular parcel, but in addition, in reference to the agenda report. So staff suggests the possibility of creating more by right processes for projects to adhere to the general plan and development code requirements. We would be in support of that suggestion, as the length of an entitlement between a conditional use permit and a tentative map to a land use compliance review, which is the by right application process, it would vary significantly. So what generally would take about 6 to 8 months for like a conditional use permit or tentative map, assuming that there's no major setbacks in the process, would be reduced to about 2 to 3 months if they were to go through the land use compliance review process, which would be a significant boon to the ability to successfully develop some of these residential projects. And then there's one last thing. In the staff report, they also suggest about reducing development impediments, such as the reduction of fees and processing procedures that could hinder that development. And so one of the major hurdles that we have been facing as a developer that we've just come across recently is the on-call environmental services that are required for all entitlements, or entitlements that require CEQA review. So historically, the planning department has been responsible for preparing all CEQA documents, including initial studies, M&Ds, et cetera. I've even participated in some of those myself when I used to work here. But within the last 6 months, at a council meeting as a consent calendar item, where there was no opportunity for public comment, the city agreed to require all entitlement projects requiring CEQA review to outsource the environmental review to a list of agencies that was picked by the city. Now, while this process does take some burden off of the planning staff, it does create a significant fiscal burden on the developer that hinders development. So an example is we have an entitlement that's currently being processed. It's 5 acres, a 14-unit single-family subdivision. What once generally cost between $2,000 to $4,000 has now increased to a range of $12,000 to $50,000, and that's solely just for the environmental review, which is cost prohibitive. And so my final sentiment is that we would like to go on record that we object to the requirement to utilize on-call environmental services. And if the city were to process environmental reviews in-house again, as has been done historically since its incorporation as a city, it would further reduce impediments to development that we are trying to avoid.
Right. All right. Thanks, Travis. Ray, that change in the CEQA requirement actually was a state mandate, wasn't it? Correct?
It's a mixed bag. There are some state requirements that go beyond what Mr. Heaps experienced when he was working here. So that's part of the issue. Part of the issue was just staffing at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with Mr. Matlock on some adjustments to our approach based on comments I received before the holidays, so that we do more of that in-house. But some of the new state requirements are a little beyond our expertise in terms of the way traffic reviews have to be done now. Not that we couldn't become more expert in that area, but our recommendation, we'll come back to council with a strategy, but our recommendation is to continue with some of that with consulting services, but take on more of that CEQA process with staff again, as Mr. Heaps mentioned. It is I was surprised at the cost that was being incurred when I learned of that.
The CEQA process and the impact fee process, I believe, are really what's driving so much of these problems that the state tries to make up with all these
agreed
onerous laws. Instead of actually fixing the problem, they come up with all these other. Anyways, that's my perception of the whole thing.
Agreed.
So, but I know we do have some things that we needed to discuss today. We have a few options. Do you want to, Ben? Can you do it in a quick summary of what you need from us?
Yeah. So I did prepare just a little exhibit to kind of rank some of the different strategies, and city council can provide direction either as a prioritization on different approaches that they would like to take, or what is a non-starter, what has some support, and it's kind of going through the different ones. So one is kind of going through the existing sites and the listings. So the freeway corridor is a prime example of trying to ensure we can get credit for that. However, Mark, as during his presentation, did note that the ability to count those sites has gotten a lot more difficult with state law and some of the checks and balances that they've created for agencies through that process. We will certainly provide as much focus to do that, but that's one priority that city council may have. The second one is amending the Uptown specific plan to allow the 24 dwelling units per acre by right in lieu of the current conditional use permit and development opportunity reserve process that's in place. The two different ones related to the mobile home parks. One is the mobile home park preservation, whether or not the city would like to commit financial resources in order to see that be met, in order to claim some of those unit credits. Or 2B, which is the amending the mobile home conversion process for the mobile home part 3 overlay to allow the 24 dwelling units per right, by right, and removing the development opportunity reserve and trying to, similar to some of the challenges with HCD requirements, try to claim credit to the extent possible on that net increase of units that would have been allowed with that conversion process. The third one is the greater promotion of accessory dwelling units and whether or not the city council would want to have a more aggressive strategy to encourage those units and perhaps unlock some of those for the lower income categories. And then 4 and 5 are kind of very similar. One is the rezoning of commercial sites for housing. As council may know, the city council did approve one such rezoning request at the end of the year last year. And then there's another one that's in the pipeline right now. And then a pre-app was also filed for another commercial site rezoning. And then the fifth one is kind of upzoning in select areas where there may be some benefits. And so the tax opportunity zone is one such example of where that would be.
All right. Okay, so we do have to, I guess, if you want me to start, or David, you like to start, or?
Are we done with the presentation from the other gentleman that's on the phone?
Mark, yeah.
Okay.
I guess I can start if, try to move it along,
Yeah,
I
go
guess. I wouldn't be opposed to looking at item number 1, and then also 2B, amending the mobile home conversion process. I don't know, does greater promotion of ADUs really impact our RENA numbers?
Not substantially. Cities that have become more aggressive through the promotion of ADUs, and especially those that have ended up seeing a pretty big uptick on those ADU projects, are getting a lot more credit for them. So some cities are being able to rely pretty heavily on ADUs. The city itself, in terms of our processing, we've seen a few come through. It's ramping up a little bit, and state law, as you may know, already provides quite a bit of flexibility or promotion of ADUs, but it isn't necessarily to the same percentage as other jurisdictions are seeing. And so it would be a question of, do we want to kind of really further either subsidize it, provide, off-the-shelf plans and other metrics to streamline that process and hopefully pick up more units.
The only thing I don't like about this, whatever you have up here, is where it says priority, because it's really not my priority. It's just what can I live with? Yeah, that might be a better way of putting it. Priority is definitely not it. But I wouldn't mind looking at those two issues. Anyone else?
What does that look like in the Uptown there, option 1? What does that look like? I mean, starting with Bryant going down to 2nd Street, would that be Sale Drug, the Sale Drug site? Would that be where we put an apartment complex that you're going to have 24 units to the acre? And where else would you put something like that? I mean, just realistically.
Yeah, it could be Sale Drug site. It could be the site owned by the Masafari family next to Don Bradley's building at the corner there. It could be the city property next to the YPAC parking lot. There are a couple of other vacant or underutilized sites. Not a lot of units there, but the one advantage of that alternative is it's not an increase in density. It's the same density that people are allowed today. It's just a change in the process.
Can I?
Go ahead.
So in that scenario, you just simply allow the property owner to have the option of going up and building more apartments, basically.
Essentially, yeah. And which they have today. It's just the process changed. They don't have to go through the DOR process. I call it a beauty pageant process, which, you know, we thought was a good idea at the time. It just doesn't allow us to count those sites for the housing element.
So we're trying to decide right now how these 5 options will impact our ability to meet the RENA obligations that the governor has so graciously set for us here in Yucaipa. I would support that option 1 for sure. We've already done something with the mobile homes, like 7 parks. We offered that option and nobody's taken us up on that.
Yeah, so that's very similar. Right now, they have to go through a beauty pageant process with council to determine whether or not the reuse is appropriate based on the value of the aesthetics and the design of the project. What we're asking is council okay with at least looking at the option of going to a by right 24 to the acre rezone for those same 7 parks. It's just, again, changing the process. As it is today, they could reuse those parks at 24 to the acre. This would change the process so that they would be, as Mr. Heaps mentioned, certainty is really important to developers. And so this would create more certainty in that process.
And what's going to happen is once the newspaper publishes this, if we go with option 2 or 3, the folks that live in those mobile home parks that can't afford much more than what they have, they're just going to lose their mind because they're going to think that government moves faster than it really does, and this whole process might in fact impact them next month, and it will not impact them for 6 years or whatever. But
I will say this, that we have one owner that has at least had preliminary conversations with staff, and that particular owner, I think, owns 3 parks, 2 or 3 parks. 4 or 5 now, and the conversation included the potential for moving people from one park to another before the affordable housing project was constructed. So not that, no guarantees there, but that was the thought process.
yeah, I would agree with Greg on 2B. What is mobile home preservation? I missed something there. What does that look like, or what is that?
So in an affordable housing project, the owner has to apply restrictions in terms of income requirements. They can't increase the rent over a certain amount, and it's a 55-year obligation, covenants. The senior housing projects that we have worked on with our affordable housing partners have to live with those covenants, with those restrictions. The only way you would get credit for preservation of mobile home park, in my mind, and maybe Mark has some qualifications here, but the only way I see that you would get credit for those mobile home parks in aggregate in preserving them is to apply covenants and to guarantee that those rents aren't going to go up any more than a certain amount over that 55-year period. That typically requires a subsidy. That typically requires a financial contribution from the city for somebody to partner on that kind of effort.
So the greater promotion of ADUs, my understanding is the governor has dictated that that process is supposed to be expedited. Have we done that? Have we expedited that process for sure?
We have, consistent with the state law requirements, but only to what is required by state law. Other jurisdictions that have gone as part of their greater promotion have allowed a little bit more beyond that. Some of the projects that may require some level of review, they have made those strictly building permit only processes, or also allowed a little bit more flexibility on some of the restrictions that the code would otherwise allow. So it's little things that just kind of make it a little bit more simple and streamlined would be what would be entailed there, and then any other metrics, so either development impact fees or other programs that further incentivize the creation of ADUs.
Did I hear that gentleman say that by promoting or expanding or building out the ADU qualified or properties that we'd add 500? Is that what he said? Did I miss that?
Yeah,
well, go ahead, Mark.
In the cities that I'm working with, I've seen cities use anywhere between 100 to 500 units credit over the planning cycle. And the more units that you want to go after or claim, if you're claiming quite a few units over what your current production levels are, you would need to have, and HCD would require, when I say you need to, that's HCD would require a monitoring program to monitor those on an annual basis. And if for some reason that level of production was not occurring, there may be a rezoning requirement later in the planning cycle. HCD would also look for ways that the city can encourage that level of production, which typically means, as Ben mentioned, there may or there could be fee reductions, or there could be development of stamped plans, so developers can see what's kind of pre-approved and choose one of the plans. But the short and long of it is that it's possible to claim up to probably 100 to 500 units, but the higher number that you claim, there needs to be more incentives in place to claim those credits. And it's a bit of a negotiation process. That's what will be involved. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, I get it. So rezone commercial sites, those sites that were specified or shown in the presentation, if we were to approve that, would we want the property owners to sort of buy into that before we just make an arbitrary rule? Because does that decrease the value of that property from commercial to residential? Would that decrease the value of the property?
Yeah, you wouldn't want to go down that path if you didn't have property owner concurrence. And Ben can speak to this better than I can. There may be an overlay that allows for that flexibility with that being incentive versus a requirement.
Yeah, we, as part of that list, just kind of picked a few different commercial sites that were a little bit larger that would certainly fit in with HCD's requirements, their proximity to pieces of infrastructure or other development where that land use may make sense. In terms of outreach, I've had some input from different commercial property owners that are interested in going to residential, recognizing that the commercial industry or the capacity for commercial land uses has diminished substantially over many years with, the bid box stores, but even now online distribution where some of the brick and mortar facilities just isn't as pragmatic. And then certainly with different applications we've received, so 2 different planning applications had been specifically turned in, one approved so far, one in the pipeline, and then the third one being in the pre-app review, and they're looking to submit in the next 2 months. So there's certainly, I think the market is favoring towards that, but we also, as Mark identified, don't want to necessarily remove all our commercial sites within the city just because there is potential benefits for those to mature as well as the market grows.
You good?
I'm good, yeah, I think so.
David, you like to go?
Yeah, real fast, I think, I agree with Greg and Bobby on amending the Uptown specific plan, allowing that. In a perfect world, you can go down Brea Boulevard in Brea, and they've got all these shops on the bottom, and they've got some apartments up on top, and it's very urban looking, but that's kind of the feel of what our Uptown is supposed to be anyway. And so that might be a good way to get some dwelling units in there. Number 2B, I just heard city clerk say that one owner owns 5 of the 7 mobile home parks. No?
That person owns 5 parks in general.
Oh, owns
but
5 parks in
not
general.
5 of the 7.
I think one is only in the mobile home park 3 overlay.
And I know that it can be difficult relocating people, especially that the property owner is going to be responsible for providing a mobile home replacement within 25 miles of that park, which can be a daunting task at best. So I can go with that, but I don't see how that could be too successful unless farther down the road, maybe something happens where the mobile home themselves get bought up by the owner and not being used by anybody. With respect to rezoning commercial sites for housing, I can see how that can work. And Ray and I have talked about this maybe once or twice, that northwest corner of Bryant and Oakland Road across the street from the Rite Aid, in between that vacant land by the Lakeview Mobile Home Park. I can envision some sort of housing development going on through there, multi-housing, since across the street, across Bryant is going to be a commercial, and then we've got Stater Brothers, Caddy Corner, and Rite Aid right across the street. I can see something, a potential, providing our circulation our circulation requirements are met, and our traffic studies show that we can put that, that number of housing at that corner. I can see some.
I'm sorry, your instincts are good, because somebody is actually proposing a residential project there right now.
The pre-app review that I mentioned before was specifically that site.
Oh, okay, well, hey, look at me. So, I can see how that can be, if that's zone commercial, I can see how, if a developer wants to, agree to put housing there, I can see the possibility in that.
All right. Councilmember Thorpe or Councilmember Beaver?
I think from what I'm hearing and my limited knowledge of this right now is that I could go with 1 and 2B right now. With number 4, if you rezone from commercial, would it be, can you do dual purpose? So it'd be commercial and residential if you did like what Dave was talking about, where you'd have shops underneath and possible apartments on top. Would that be a dual zone? Is that what that would be?
We could establish a mixed-use type zoning district that would allow the residential capacity, but then certainly carry over existing commercial use as well. So that would be creating a new development code or land use district, but that can certainly be facilitated as well.
And Ben, if I can just chime in on that as well. If it's a situation where you want to do the true mixed use, there will be some challenges, more challenges in getting it through HCD, just because typically the issue is project feasibility, and most mixed use projects do not yield affordable units unless there's a requirement. So I just want to make sure that if the choice is to go mixed use, it's definitely not as easy as a route to go if it's just straight residential for a portion of the project and having it be adjacent to commercial uses. So essentially you have horizontal mixed use rather than vertical mixed use. And so the vertical mixed use can be very challenging to get credit. And it's I won't say it's unlikely, but I would not guarantee it. Horizontal, next door to one another, on separate parcels, yes, you'll have a lot better chance of obtaining the credit you're looking for the low and the very low.
All right, so those are two?
Yeah.
All right, Councilmember Beaver.
First, I want to go on the record and say I don't buy into this RENA stuff at all. I know that it's not me that has to be convinced, and it is now the law of the land. However, I refuse to believe that we are facing a housing crisis, which is the catalyst for RENA. When you consider the mainstream media on both sides of the partisan aisle are reporting that Californians are fleeing the states in record numbers. So they haven't convinced me that there's a housing crisis. But with that being said, I will entertain the idea of number 1, as long as we're cautious about our use of our uptown. When you consider our attempts are to make that an attractive area for visitors to come and eat and observe our YPAC. I'm not certain that an apartment complex in the middle of that would be too in line with our plan for the uptown revitalization. 2B, I agree with. I think it will be challenging. However, I think the city staff should put all effort at making that an attractive deal with mobile home parks that are in that program. And just to clarify, 5, is that the maps that were discussed from 3rd and Bella Vista, 14th and Boulevard? Is that with that?
So the ones that were on 3rd Street is the number 5, and then the other ones, which are on Yucaipa Boulevard, is number 4.
Yeah, I think as they come, if there's a way we can entertain them as we see that developers are interested. I think that would be best to, you know, there's interest expressed at 14th and Yucaipa Boulevard, and that's something we can determine as on a basis as it's presented to us. I'm not sure I want to approve or, you know, agree to anything right now, but depending on the development and what it's going to look like, it may fit into that scenery. So I would say for me, 1, 2B, and 5.
5, to confirm, 4 as well for the commercial sites or just the opportunity zone?
I'm just cautious about the potential of, you know, changing the zoning and then watching that, as it was previously discussed, the cost of that property or the value of that property change because of the, you know, slamming of the gavel by our mayor saying that now is what we want to look at, and overnight changing somebody's property value that was higher yesterday than it is now today because of our decision. So I'm cautious on that one.
So maybe it would be that in both cases, only when the property owner is interested in going down that path.
I think that would be best versus making a blanket order up here and changing somebody's value that they're maybe banking on or trying to invest on their property, changing the value of their property potentially because of what we say.
Okay, so it would be a limited number in both of those categories based on those property owners that are interested in going down that path now, so that we can, if we're going to use those two alternatives, so that we can get credit for those in developing the housing element for HCD to look at over the next several months. We would have to have those conversations with those property owners in the next couple of months to make sure that that's the direction they're going. If they are going in that direction, you might be willing to look at those two options. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I mean, as much as we're able to, I think we should
Yeah.
we should consider the desire of our constituents as well, while trying to comply with this state mandate.
Well, just for the record, they already have that opportunity anyway, right? Anyone has an opportunity for a general plan amendment, period.
They
Doesn't
do,
matter.
but the housing element may or may not, depending on what you decide, reflect a certain area along Yucaipa Boulevard or a certain area within the opportunity zone that might be either a mixed use, horizontal mixed use, or a residentially upzoned property from what we have today, or a conversion from commercial to residential. And so through the housing element process, you might get credit for 100 units of commercial converted to residential, or 200 units, whatever the number might be from those projects you saw. And you might get credit in the opportunity zone for another 100 units that you saw tonight. In the housing element process, if there's an interest in creating that zoning that allows for those two things as a part of the housing element update. The other choice is to just let those projects come to you for a rezone. As you said, they have that option to come to you for a rezone anytime. But in order to count them in the housing element, we would have to establish that opportunity now that those property owners might be interested in those two options.
Right, I know Bob has something.
So the conversation that we had a little earlier where Greg said that the SECA process was mandated by the state, and the issue that Travis raised about that item that came through back in July on consent, is there I mean, I know that staffing is in cost, but my understanding is that costs a lot more money to send that out to the agency that we approved, and that now that Paul is gone, that we really don't have maybe the expertise or the time. I don't know what the idea there is, but is there a cheaper way to do that or a better way to do that? Because I know that I've heard some complaining that it added a lot of money, and that's going to impair our ability to approve these projects if the developers are run off because the costs are too high.
Yeah, and as you mentioned earlier, we followed up on that, and there is an issue. Initially, it was primarily relative to staffing. Planning staff was down at the time. It's been, those positions have been filled now. That's part of it. Certainly Ben has the expertise in the CEQA area that Paul did. The one area that we don't have the expertise as much is this new traffic analysis requirement that not a lot of folks that our staff at cities have that kind of expertise. So it's typically put out to consultants. And so what I suggested earlier is that we could do more of that CEQA process than we are doing now, and Ben's working in that direction. But I think we still need to send out some of the technical studies, especially the traffic studies, to a consultant to look at that. So it's a mixed bag. Yes, there are more requirements now than when Travis worked on some of those things when he worked for the city. But number two, it is something we need to work on. We need to try to get those costs down through doing some of that ourselves, so.
Okay. All right, so now you have direction
No,
where we're headed at this point?
I just,
Ben, if I could just ask one other question.
yes.
And, I counted up the units that we're talking about in the various options. And so I just want to be mindful of the fact that the freeway corridor currently is projected for 960 units. So the question that I have is that if those 960 units were not deemed to be feasible for the sixth cycle, do the options that we have presently total 960 units? And the reason why that would be needed is because we also have to have a buffer of up to 30% for that. And the sites, what we've discussed so far is the Uptown, the mobile home park, which is going to be very challenging, I'll tell you, in terms of getting credit for that, and the ADUs, and a select site at Bryant, and the upzoning of those two properties in the federal opportunity zone. Will that get us at least 950 units? And I don't have a calculator or don't know the specifics of all the projects, but I think we need to keep in mind we need to hit that number, and also recognizing that the housing element will need to go to the state shortly in the next number of months. And once we get into the process, we want to make sure that if we have to fall back on a property, where would that possibly be? So again, I don't have the magic calculator to calculate projects as we go, and I'll just put it out there, Ray. I don't know if you have a general estimate, or Ben, you have a general estimate of where that leaves us.
That's not part of the 9.
Ray, the 30% buffer, is that a city mandated requirement, or is that from
I think that's
PlaceWorks?
just guidance, isn't it, Mark?
No, it's actually the new guidelines from HCD recommend a 15 to 30% buffer.
That's guidance.
And the reason why they do
Why
that
not just give an
is
actual number?
to avoid the no net loss issue and having to, because if you run out of sites, what that means is that you would have to make findings for every multiple family development that you still have sufficient sites to meet the unlit portion of the RENA. And so to avoid having to, and if you don't have enough sites for somebody, say for example, a project goes and it's built condominiums, high-end condominiums, what would happen is the city has only 6 months to pull another site, have a GPU or GPA, and to incorporate it and get it approved by HCD. So the thought is if you have sites that are available, it will avoid that necessity of kind of planning on the fly and having to replace sites that are lost. So there's some rationale for it. And whether it's 15, whether it's 25, whether it's 30, it's really at your comfort level. But I'm sure HCD will be looking at it.
If I may kind of help conceptualize it, let's say as part of our housing element or housing sites, we assume 200 affordable units on a particular property. A project we really, as a community, light shows up and they're doing, let's say, 150 dwelling units instead. That would mean that we're on the hook for then making up those 50 units that aren't proposed that was originally planned for. And so that's where that buffer is kind of an unofficial housing site solicits really give us enough flexibility that we can still have the ability to approve projects that we want to, that are consistent with the general plan and development code, but without us having to scramble with each specific project approval that may be, 1 unit less or 50 units less to make up that delta. So
This seems like a study session that could go on for literally. We could talk about this forever. So, is there a possibility we continue this into a future? A future date. You can implement what we have given you to this point,
and throw some numbers at it and come back to you.
And then just come back.
Yeah,
because I think this could just go on and on and on.
Absolutely.
And I guess just for clarification, for the rezoning and commercial sites and the upzoning for Councilmember Beaver, is the intention at this point just to reach out to property owners and see if there's any interest and then provide that so that we have that list kind of ready to go, or is just wait till specific projects show up later on and not get credit this time, but have them go through that?
Are the examples that were provided to council today, the mapped images, are those currently zoned commercial, and those where we're talking about of rezoning those?
The few sites, the last two were residentially zoned, and so it'd be upzoning them. So it's site 5 and 6, but then the rest were all commercial zoning.
Okay, so I think we should upzone where it is feasible for, or where we believe that is going to be benefit both the city and meet our RENA numbers, and where there's interest by either investors or developers to develop there. And then on the other ones, I'm not certain. I saw the fruit stand on the boulevard, the produce stand. Are they aware that we're looking at their property and considering changing it from a commercial to a residential or mixed use? Are they aware of that? And so that's what I want to be cautious on. So I think those areas that you've highlighted to us, I would suggest that we reach out to those ones specifically and say, hey, are you interested in selling to, or having a residential developer come in before we pull the rug out from underneath them?
And, just to be clear, I don't think the city, or certainly me, and none of us ought to dais here, want to discourage or arbitrarily change a commercial zone to a residential zone. The options should be given to the owners of the property, and by feeling it out, maybe the fruit stand says, yeah, you know what, we're not making any money, which they aren't.
Right.
And it might be better for us to go this way. At least they know, but we're not cities. Yucaipa does not have a history of forcing people out of their commercial zone. We've always had this history, at least of letting, just, if there's a business there or somebody wants a commercial zone, it's commercial, but we just give them the option. And that's all I'm trying to articulate, is that if there are opportunities and the owners are willing to go there, let's go there. If like you said, if it's feasible and reasonable.
I think that's the thing, is if we're being faced with a number that we have to meet, and we're identifying these are potential properties where we could meet those numbers, and maybe city staff should reach out to them and let them know that we're looking at that property for that. We're considering that.
Yeah.
So that sounds like
clear direction.
that's going to require us to come
back to you.
Come back in a future study session, so.
You could put my name on that one too.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
on number 4.
All right, so is that enough
We've
to
got
this
plenty.
point? Okay.
Thank you so much. I know this is not an easy subject to work through, so.
All right.
Thank you,
so-
Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. So that takes
Welcome.
us,
Thank you.
takes us to announcements. Are there any announcements?
Just that I hope we get to have our Music and Arts Festival.
Yeah, that's,
I'd just like to thank the 2 new members. Good job, guys.
yep.
Good job.
All right, John, you have anything?
I do not.
Justin, good? All right, so we do have a closed session, a couple of items. Dave, are you
Yes,
still
we do.
there?
Thank you, Mr. I am, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've got 2 items. The first is conference with legal counsel regarding anticipated litigation. It is liability claim number 2020-17, GD, a minor child. We would not, would expect reportable action on that item this evening. The second item is conference with real property negotiator regarding the property listed on the agenda. The city manager is the city's negotiator, and it's the city of Yucaipa under negotiation terms of real property disposition agreement. And we would not expect reportable action on that item this evening.
All right, thank you much. This council meeting is now adjourned.
Are we going to stay here?